Did you know Dark Souls 3 was already in development before Dark Souls 2 even released? And for a stretch of time, it was being made at the same time as Bloodborne. While players were still getting used to Dark Souls 2, From Software had already split into two internal teams. One was building Bloodborne's hyper-aggressive gothic nightmare, and the other was quietly laying the foundation for Dark Souls 3. And no, Miyazaki wasn't personally directing every animation in both games, like some kind of cursed undead. Instead, he acted more like a creative overseer. He set the core design pillars, checked in on major systems, and made sure both projects stayed thematically on track, while day-to-day direction was handled separately to avoid bottlenecks. What makes this especially interesting is that this was not normal for From Software. Historically, they focused on one major Souls project at a time. Running two in parallel was a deliberate move, and it happened right after the mixed fan reception to Dark Souls 2. DS2 sold well, but fans criticized its world cohesion, enemy placement, and slower, more mechanical combat. So while Bloodborne was allowed to go fully experimental, faster movement, aggressive enemies, and almost no reliance on shields, Dark Souls 3 was designed as a course correction. And once you know this, you can feel Bloodborne's influence all over Dark Souls 3. Combat in DS3 is noticeably faster than Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 1. Rolls recover quicker, enemies apply constant pressure, bosses don't politely wait for you to heal. That design philosophy didn't come out of nowhere. It was directly informed by what the Bloodborne team was doing at the same time. Bosses like the Abyss Watchers, Pontiff Sulyvahn, the Dancer, and the Nameless King all punish passive play and reward aggression. They feel way closer to Bloodborne's relentless style than anything in Dark Souls 2. Just balanced around shields and stamina, so it still feels like Dark Souls. I completely missed this on my first playthrough, but Dark Souls 3 isn't the final Dark Souls. It's more like a synthesis of everything the studio learned while making Bloodborne, filtered back into the Souls formula. Dark Souls 3, like many other games, has several versions before its final release, but Dark Souls 3's journey was tumultuous. DS3 was basically reassembled from the wreckage of a completely different game. Originally, Dark Souls 3 wasn't about linking the fire again. You were meant to be actively stopping the Age of Dark by collecting fragments of Pontiff Sulyvahn's soul, and then fighting him as the final boss. Sulyvahn wasn't just some mid-game tyrant, he was the spine of the story. And honestly, that part wasn't even the craziest thing. What really matters is that almost nothing in Dark Souls 3 is where it was originally supposed to be. Bosses, area progression, all of it got shuffled around late in development like a panicked group project the night before the deadline. Players were originally meant to create their own bonfires, not just light, pre-placed ones. World progression was supposed to be more freeform, with areas looping back into each other in ways that barely exist in the final game. For example, Smoldering Lake was meant to connect directly to Irithyll Dungeon, and the Cursed Greatwood Arena was originally a path into the catacombs of Carthus. And Carthus, you were actually supposed to go there. Not just some dusty hallway full of skeletons, a full desert temple region, which explains why Carthus lore feels like it's referencing a place that barely exists. There was also a selectable time of day system, similar to what Elden Ring eventually shipped with. And once you hear that, a lot of DS3 suddenly makes sense. Especially those weird skyboxes and lighting that feel like they're missing something. Some of the cut stuff, though, is genuinely unhinged. For example, Gundyr wasn't originally Gundyr. He was meant to be Osiris. The entire Pus of Man infection arc was supposed to culminate in that fight. with his mid-battle transformation being the payoff for that storyline instead of a random swamp enemy gimmick. And the Osiris we didn't get, yeah, he was originally meant to be holding his baby during the fight, and at some point crush it mid-battle. I can see why that got cut. That is some aggressively Bloodborne energy. Still wild that it got that far though. Speaking of wild cuts, Koth was planned to appear in his full winged serpent form during the Twin Princes fight, flying into the massive hole above the arena. That hole isn't just set dressing, it's a scar from a scene that never happened. You were also meant to fight the mother dragon you see praying at Archdragon Peak, not just gesture at her and teleport. She was supposed to be a full encounter, in the same general area as release version Osiris. And Aldrich, he wasn't even supposed to get his own boss fight. Originally, he would seep out of the coffin during the Deacons of the Deep, turning that fight into something much more horrific. This explains why Aldrich feels strangely disconnected from the cathedral, despite being the most important thing there. Fans caught glimpses of this version of the game in pre-alpha screenshots from 2015, including areas where the sun appears to bleed humanity out of the sky. And yeah, it looks sick as fuck. But at some point, pretty late in development, From Software hit the brakes hard. Whether it was publisher deadlines, over-ambition, or just the reality of trying to juggle DS3 while Bloodborne and DLC were still fresh, the decision was basically, we can't finish this, patch it together, and ship. And that is when Dark Souls 3 became, well, what it is. You can see the seams everywhere once you know how to look. Areas like Profaned Capital feel blatantly unfinished, with lore that hints at huge importance, but never actually goes anywhere. Tons of cut gear remain in the files, and some items don't even match their icons, like Lorien's Greatsword or the Wolf Knight Greatsword, which clearly went through last-minute redesigns. Mechanically, you can feel the rush, too. Power stancing is gone. Environmental interactions from Dark Souls 2 vanished. Systems that already existed were dropped, likely because production cycles didn't line up. And this is where opinions split. Some people feel Dark Souls 3 is the polished peak of Souls combat. Others, and honestly I kind of agree, feel like it's a frantic attempt to force Dark Souls mechanics to move at Bloodborne speed, without fully committing to either identity. Dark Souls 3 has this sneaky trick where the opening hours feel like you slipped on an old pair of boots. Everything fits instantly. Your hands remember the weight of stamina, the spacing, and the punishment for greed. Oh, and that, oh yeah, I'm home feeling. Miyazaki basically admitted it was intentional. In interviews around release, he talked about how the early areas were designed to feel classic, like the franchise's greatest hits in tone and rhythm, which is such a quiet power move, because Dark Souls 3 is a sequel. Sequels don't get the same mystery that the first game had. You can't unknow what a Souls game looks like, so Dark Souls 3 front-loads a familiar language to get you oriented fast. And you can feel that language everywhere. You start in a grim tutorial zone that wastes no time teaching the real rules. Manage stamina, read animations, don't panic roll, don't get cute. Then your first harsh test, boss gate. The one that basically checks if you're going to play Souls properly. Then, boom, hub. Firekeeper, NPC threads, upgrades, the works. It's the classic Souls cadence, delivered clean and quick. Like the game is saying, alright, you know the drill. Even the imagery is speaking in an old dialect. Knights, hollows, ramparts, dragons looming in the distance. ruined high fantasy architecture that still looks proud but tired. Not broken yet, just worn down like it's been through this cycle too many times. And the trap grammar is straight up veteran bait. A corpse in the right spot to make you slow down. A shiny item placed where your instincts scream free loot, and your experience screams that's a trap. Enemies positioned to catch you right after a swing or a heal. Vertical sight lines where something watches you from above, waiting for the exact moment you commit. Dark Souls 3 doesn't need to explain any of it, because returning players already read the punctuation. So the game gets you comfortable. Then it starts turning the temperature down little by little. Miyazaki also described the way DS3 leans harder into an end-of-days mood as you progress. This growing sadness and melancholy that starts clinging to everything. Enemies stop feeling like obstacles and start feeling like exhausted remnants. Locations feel less like places built to live in and more like places left behind. The world starts carrying itself like it's running out of reasons to keep going. That's why the structure hits the way it does. The opening feels familiar. Then the decay becomes impossible to ignore. Then the past begins to converge, and the later game starts feeling like the whole setting is collapsing inward under the weight of its own history. And the Firekeeper through line matters here too. Miyazaki talked about DS3 building on the story foundations of the earlier games, stuff that returns not as a wink, but as connective tissue. Because DS3's whole vibe is you recognize this, and that recognition is part of the dread. You're walking through something that has repeated itself so many times, it started to fray. I completely missed how deliberate that was on my first run. I just thought, wow, this feels very Dark Souls. Then you hit the later stretch, and the tone quietly shifts into, yeah, and it's tired of being Dark Souls. Dark Souls 3 also does something really telling with hollowing, and it's another place where you can feel the studio reacting to its own history. Across the trilogy, hollowing keeps changing, because From Software kept learning what death should feel like in a Souls game. In Dark Souls 1, hollowing was mostly a state of being, not a punishment. You looked different, you lost access to certain online features, and restoring humanity felt meaningful. But dying itself didn't slowly ruin your character. Mechanically, it was forgiving. Psychologically, it was heavy. And most players were fine with that, because hollowing felt like atmosphere, not a slap on the wrist. Dark Souls 2 went in the opposite direction. Hollowing became a system that taxed you for dying. Every death shaved off max HP, stacking all the way to about half of your health bar, unless you burned a human effigy. It created constant pressure to stay human, which sounds thematic, but in practice, it punished the exact behavior Souls games are built around: dying, learning, and trying again. A lot of players bounced off that, not because they hated difficulty, but because the game was actively discouraging experimentation. You would die to learn a boss pattern, and the game would say, cool, now you're weaker. Even Miyazaki later talked about how death should be instructional, not demoralizing. And DS2 crossed that line for a lot of people. In DS3, hollowing is decoupled from punishment almost entirely. You don't lose max HP, your stats don't degrade, you don't get shoved into a resource drain just for playing the game the way it expects you to play. Mechanically, hollowing barely touches you at all. You only ever engage with it if you follow a very specific NPC questline. The effects are mostly visual. Your character becomes ashen and corpse-like, and narrative. Hollowing unlocks certain interactions, some dark miracles, and specific endings. And that's it. You can finish the entire game without ever meaningfully hollowing, and nothing about your core gameplay loop suffers. That's why so many players have the same reaction. This is the first time hollowing feels right. This world is already past collapse. The Age of Fire is failing whether you show up or not. Lords of Cinder refuse their thrones. Enemies don't rage. They look tired, resigned, like they've somehow been hollow for a long time already. Even your character isn't a fresh undead anymore. You are unkindled ash, someone who already failed once, burned out, and got dragged back anyway. Mechanically, punishing hollowing in a world like that would be redundant. The tragedy has already happened. So DS3 treats hollowing as something the world is drowning in, something you slowly fall into. It's narrative weight, not a gameplay shackle. And this wasn't accidental. Dark Souls 3 comes after the backlash to DS2's systems, and after Bloodborne proved you could build a death-heavy game without layering punishment on top of learning. From Software had clearly internalized something by then. If death is inevitable, the game has to respect the player's psychology. So DS3 keeps hollowing where it matters. Lore, endings, identity, and strips it out of the learning loop. You're allowed to fail. You're allowed to experiment. And if you choose to walk the hollow path, it's because you want to see where it leads, not because the game is squeezing you into it. Dark Souls 3 also ended up doing something no one really expected at the time. It absolutely detonated at launch. Bandai Namco came out right after release and said that DS3 had the most successful launch day in the publisher history, and that it was the fastest-selling game they'd ever released on early sales pace. And there's a bit of nuance there. Some outlets framed it as Bandai Namco globally. Others clarified it was specifically Bandai Namco America, the US publishing arm. Either way, it still means Dark Souls 3 outperformed everything they'd put out before. Tekken, Tales, Dragon Ball, all of it, at least out of the gate. The first concrete numbers showed up about a month later, when Bandai Namco announced 3 million units shipped worldwide. Not sold through yet, shipped to retailers, but still massive for a series that started as a cult hit. The regional split is pretty telling as well. About 1.5 million units went to North America, 1 million to Europe, and 500,000 to Japan, and the rest of Asia. At that point, Dark Souls had fully crossed over from hardcore niche RPG into a global event release. And that momentum didn't stop. By 2020, Bandai Namco confirmed Dark Souls 3 had passed 10 million units sold worldwide, making it comfortably the best-selling game in the trilogy. What's interesting is why DS3 spiked so hard on day one. Part of it was timing. Dark Souls 3 had a near simultaneous global release, Japan in late March, worldwide in early April, which meant hype didn't bleed out over months like it used to. Everyone was playing at the same time. Streams, guides, spoilers, discoveries, it all hit at once. Part of it was positioning. DS3 was marketed very clearly as a culmination, not just another Souls game, but the end of the storyline. Even people who bounced off DS2 still showed up, because Dark Souls 3 felt like a statement. And part of it was platforms. Dark Souls 3 launched on PS4, Xbox One, and PC, which massively widened the day one audience compared to earlier entries that were split across generations. Dark Souls 3 is a game about exhaustion, about cycles collapsing, a world running on fumes. And it launched as the biggest commercial success the series had ever seen. Let's take a look at the tutorial boss of DS3, a boss that countless gamers died to and some even rage quit on. But behind this menace is a sad boss, Gundyr is another place where Dark Souls 3 quietly tells you a lot without ever stopping to explain itself. Right from the start, the game frames Iudex Gundyr like a less random monster and more like a gatekeeper. The coiled sword, the single most important object in the early game, is literally embedded in his chest. Its description says, it's only given to chosen ash, as judged by the Iudex, and that Gundyr waits as a kind of living scabbard. And that is exactly what you do. You pull the sword from him, prove yourself, and only then are you allowed to reach Firelink Shrine. That word, Iudex, matters. It's Latin, and it means judge. Gundyr isn't there to stop you forever. He's there to decide whether you are worthy to proceed. Later on, Dark Souls 3 quietly hands you the missing context. When you reach the untended graves and fight Champion Gundyr, his soul description opens with one brutal line. Once, a champion came late. That is the closest the game ever gets to spelling it out. Gundyr wasn't just some strong guy. He was a would-be linker of the flame who missed his moment. Not a failed trial, not defeated by a lord. He arrived too late. And the contrast between the two fights does a lot of storytelling on its own. Iudex Gundyr, the version you meet at the very beginning, breaks apart mid-fight. A dark serpentine mass erupts from his body, the same kind of pus of man growth you see in other corrupted enemies. He's unstable, infested, barely holding together. That transformation isn't a power-up. It feels like rot finally bursting through the surface. Champion Gundyr is the opposite. No transformation, no parasite. Just relentless, disciplined pressure. Faster attacks, tighter spacing, no theatrics. It plays like a pure duel, and for most players, it's noticeably harder. Not because he's bigger or flashier, but because he's more complete. That difference makes the implication hard to ignore. Champion Gundyr feels like what Gundyr used to be, the contender, the one who might have actually linked the flame if timing or fate hadn't screwed him, which reframes his role at the start of the game in a very sad way. He's not just guarding Firelink, he's standing at the threshold of the path he was meant to walk himself. He waits there, eternally judging the ash that arrives after him, because someone has to, and it clearly won't be him. The game never outright says the abyss corrupted Gundyr, and it doesn't need to. You see the corruption happen in real time. You see what waiting did to him. The coiled sword text even emphasizes the waiting. The Iudex awaits the arrival of ash. So when players joke that Gundyr feels like an alternate protagonist, that isn't a reach. Dark Souls 3 all but invites that thought. If Gundyr had arrived on time, if he hadn't been left standing there as the world decayed, he might have been the one traveling Lothric, gathering cinders and facing the lords. Instead, becomes the first test. Firelink Shrine also pulls one of its quietest tricks on you almost immediately, the tree jump, and it says a lot about how Dark Souls 3 wants you to think. Right after beating Gundyr, before you've even set foot in a real level, you can walk out of Firelink, head toward that big, dead-looking tree near the tower wall, line yourself up just right, and jump and roll onto the shrine's roof. No glitches, no clipping, just timing and confidence. And what's waiting up there is not throwaway junk. You can grab an Estus shard, which is huge this early. That is an extra flask use before High Wall of Lothric, a straight-up advantage during the part of the game where most new players are struggling the hardest. You can grab a Firekeeper soul, which ties directly into Dark Souls 3's reworked hollowing system. It lets you heal dark sigils later on, meaning this early secret connects mechanically and narratively to one of the game's most important long-term systems. And you can grab the covetous Silver Serpent Ring, boosting soul gain right out of the gate. That encourages early leveling, experimentation, and risk-taking, all things DS3 quietly wants you to do. These aren't joke rewards. They meaningfully change your first several hours. And here's the key thing. It's not a bug. The jump uses normal collision, normal physics, no out-of-bounds nonsense, and From Software never patched it out. Not in updates, not in later editions, not when they absolutely could have. That tells you everything you need to know. It's not scripted, but it's allowed. Another tiny thing Dark Souls 3 does that people still talk about years later is the Firekeeper reacting to your gestures. And yeah, that is real. It's not a myth, not a mod, not some one-off animation. It's been there since launch, and it is very deliberate. If you stand close to her, face her directly, and perform certain emotes, she'll actually respond. Not with dialogue, not with a quest flag, just small, bespoke animations. And it only works with a few specific gestures. Try everything and most of them do nothing, but a few she notices. If you bow, she'll sometimes return it. Not a big theatrical bow, just a gentle incline of her head. Restrained, ritualistic, very Firekeeper. It feels less like NPC animation and more like a shared courtesy. If you use sillier or exaggerated gestures, she might do a tiny twirl or let off a soft, surprised laugh. Nothing loud, nothing mocking. It's almost like she didn't expect you to behave that way, which somehow makes it feel more human instead of less. And if you push it with certain over-the-top gestures, she doesn't get angry, she doesn't scold you, she just turns her face away, covers part of it, avoids eye contact. People online love to call that disgust, but that's really not what it reads as in-game. It's closer to second-hand embarrassment, modesty, social discomfort. She's sheltered and ceremonial, not used to, well, whatever you're doing. What matters is that this exists at all. The Firekeeper levels you up, takes your souls, never asks for anything in return, never manipulates you, never disappears halfway through a quest line. The game where NPCs constantly die, betray you, or vanish without warning, but she's just there. Letting her react to emotes does a lot of quiet work. It gives her a personality without breaking her role. It makes Firelink Shrine feel lived in instead of purely transactional. It's also a big contrast with earlier Firekeepers in the series. In Dark Souls 1, they were mostly silent. Dark Souls 2, they were distant and tragic. In Dark Souls 3, the Firekeeper is always present, always calm, and crucially, quietly responsive. That's why so many players end up attached to her, not because of long dialogue trees or dramatic story beats, but because she reacts when you act like a person instead of a role. And thematically, it fits DS3 perfectly. This is a world at the end of its lifespan. Rituals are still being performed long after their meaning has started to rot. Everyone is going through the motions. The Firekeeper reacting to a gesture, even something silly, breaks that monotony just a little. It suggests there's still some humanity left under all of that ash. Mechanically, it's nothing. Emotionally, it hits way harder than it has any right to. In a game built on loss, silence, and inevitability, an NPC who never leaves, never betrays you, and quietly responds when you bow or act foolish, sticks with people. Another familiar Souls face shows up almost immediately, slumped right where you can't miss him. The crestfallen warrior archetype, back again, doing what it does best, quietly daring you to ask why he gave up. In Dark Souls 3, that role belongs to Hawkwood. When you first talk to him in Firelink Shrine, he doesn't introduce himself. He barely introduces anything. He sits on the steps leading down to the Firekeeper, arms loose, voice flat, already resigned to the idea that none of this is going to work, which is classic crestfallen behavior but DS3 sneaks in a twist. Unlike earlier games, Hawkwood isn't just some random undead who lost hope. He's unkindled, just like you. And not only that, item descriptions later confirm he was once a member of Farron's undead legion, the Abyss Watchers themselves. And that is where his shield comes in. Hawkwood's shield description paints him as a deserter, someone who fled the Legion instead of sharing their fate. The Abyss Watchers bound themselves to an endless internal war, killing one another whenever the Abyss stirred. Hawkwood walked away from that, not because he was a coward in the simple sense, but because he didn't believe in the purpose anymore. And that belief, or lack thereof, defines his entire arc. Hawkwood isn't crestfallen because he's weak. He's crestfallen because he's seen what duty actually leads to. He watched a legion of heroes trap themselves in eternal, meaningless cycle of violence. And he decided he wanted no part of it. So he ran. And the cost of running was living with the knowledge that maybe, just maybe, the Legion was right and he wasn't. That is why his dialogue constantly undercuts you. He calls you another dogged contender. He talks about the lords as if they're already dead ideas. He never cheers you on. He never really believes. Not because he hates you, but because believing again would mean admitting he might have been wrong to abandon Farron. And that's what makes Hawkwood one of the most quietly tragic characters in Dark Souls 3. Every crestfallen warrior in the series reflects a possible future for the player. Hawkwood reflects a parallel past. He's not what you'll become if you fail. He's what you might become if you survive, learn too much, and decide that the cycle isn't worth finishing. That's also why his story doesn't end in Firelink. Later, when Hawkwood finally leaves the shrine, it's not because he found hope, it's because you force him to confront the thing he ran from. His eventual challenge isn't about killing you, it's about proving something to himself. That he didn't abandon the Legion because he was weak. That walking away isn't the same as failing. And when you put that all together, Hawkwood becomes one of DS3's smartest uses of a recurring Souls trope. The crestfallen warrior usually exists to warn you. This is what happens if you give up. Hawkwood exists to ask something way more uncomfortable. What if giving up was the only honest choice, and you're the one still lying to yourself? Another quiet Dark Souls 3 detail that messes with people once they notice it is Anri. Specifically the fact that Anri's sex presentation always mirrors yours by being the opposite one. If you start the game as a male, Anri appears as a woman. If you start as a female, Anri appears as a man. And this isn't just a pronoun flip or a cosmetic toggle. Anri has two distinct voice performances.
Oh, hello. How do you do?
Oh, hello. How do you do?
And the game loads the correct one the moment your save file is created. Players caught this almost immediately after launch, when people started comparing footage and realized, wait, my Anri doesn't sound like yours. What's important is when the game makes that decision. It happens at character creation and never changes. Even if you use the reversal ring later, which only swaps animations and idle behavior, Anri stays exactly the same. The game locks Anri's version to what it considers your character's sex for that entire playthrough. And the reason this exists isn't random. Dark Souls 3 includes a very specific quest line tied to Yondor, Yuria, and the Lord of Hollows ending, where you're told you will be married to Anri as part of the ritual. Multiple in-game guides and NPC steps explicitly frame Anri as your ceremonial counterpart in that process. Now, From Software never came out and said, we did this to avoid X or Y. There's no official dev quote spelling it out, so the cleanest way to read it is this. The game aligns Anri's role with the structure of that ritual, and ensures the pairing is consistent within the system it's using. What makes it interesting is that DS3 never treats Anri as two different characters. The personality is the same. The dialogue beats are the same. The story role is the same. Only the presentation changes. Which is why, outside of a specific run, a lot of lore discussions default to treating Anri as a single character with variable sex presentation, rather than male Anri or female Anri as separate entities. And that flexibility actually fits Anri's role in the story really well. Anri is a mirror, not just mechanically, but thematically. They're another unkindled chasing Aldrich, another figure shaped by loss, another person standing at the crossroad between duty and despair and choice. Whether you help them complete their quest or sacrifice them to Londor says more about you than it does about Anri. So the fact that Anri subtly adapts to the player, right down to the voice and presentation, references that idea. They're not meant to be a fixed archetype. They're meant to be a reflection of the path you're taking through this broken world. Surviving Aldrich did not save Anri and Horace. It only gave their suffering a direction. From that moment on, their lives stopped being about living and became about ending something. Aldrich is no longer just a Lord of Cinder to them. He's the reason they exist at all in this broken state. Revenge becomes the only thing keeping them from hollowing. And this is why Anri keeps moving forward, even when everything else is falling apart. When Horace disappears beneath the catacombs, Anri doesn't stop. They worry, they hesitate, but they continue, because stopping would mean facing the possibility that survival had no meaning to begin with. Horace, meanwhile, is the warning. Separated from Anri, stripped of purpose and companionship, Horace descends into the Smoldering Lake, a place buried beneath the world, filled with the remnants of forgotten wars and ancient ruin. There he finally hollows. When encountered again, he no longer recognizes friend or foe. He attacks on instinct alone. This is what surviving Aldrich ultimately costs him. Horace shows what happens when trauma is enshrouded without an anchor. Anri shows what happens when trauma becomes the anchor itself. Anri's journey continues toward Anor Londo, not because it promises victory, but because it promises closure, and Aldrich must be confronted, not to save the world, but to justify the pain that came before. Without that confrontation, surviving him would have been meaningless. And yet even when Aldrich is slain, nothing is truly restored. Horace is gone, their past is gone, their home is gone. All that remains is the knowledge that Aldrich no longer exists to harm anyone else. In Dark Souls 3, that is as close to justice as the world ever allows. This is why Anri is not a triumphant hero. They're a survivor, trying to reach the end of their grief before it consumes them. And depending on the path taken, the world either allows that fragile resolution or uses them as fuel for yet another cycle. In that sense, Aldrich's cruelty doesn't end with his death. It lingers in the people who live through him. Anri and Horace exist to show that the Age of Fire does not only burn gods and champions, it burns families, futures, and childhoods, and sometimes it leaves survivors behind to carry the weight. Walk into Firelink Shrine, and you meet the usual suspects: a quiet firekeeper, a slumped guy on the steps, and a shopkeeper who sounds like she'd sell you your own grave if you have enough souls. But the Shrine Handmaiden has one of the nastiest little blink-and-you-miss-it lore connections in Dark Souls 3, because at a certain point, she isn't just the merchant anymore. She is Syrric's grandmother. You never get a big reveal cutscene, no dramatic grandmother moment. Instead, the game does what it always does. It slips the truth into an item description and dares you to notice. As you progress Syrris's questline, right around the point where she's gearing up to deal with Holy Knight Hodrick, the Shrine Handmaid starts selling a special bubbling green blossom, and this one has a message attached to it. Goodbye, dear grandmother. I will visit grandfather in the Pit of Hollows. That is the whole connection right there. Syrris calls Hodrick her grandfather, and Hodrick is tied to the Pit of Hollows, exactly like the note says. And the dear grandmother message showing up through the handmaiden's inventory is basically the game telling you, this is who Syrris is writing to. This is where her goodbye ends up. Once you spot it, Firelink starts feeling different. Syrris doesn't hang around the shrine like other NPCs. She drifts in, tests your allegiances, and keeps a careful distance. That behavior hits harder when you realize she still has a personal anchor here, someone she's willing to leave a message with before walking into something she might not return from. And it reframes the handmaid too. She acts like she's above all, cynical, blunt, almost amused by your suffering. But that note implies she's quietly part of one of the most personal, painful arcs in the game. Not as a quest giver, not as a boss, just as the person Syrris implicitly trusts enough to leave a final goodbye in the only way Dark Souls characters ever do, indirectly through objects. It's also grim in that uniquely Souls way. A granddaughter heading to comfort her own blood in a hollow pit. A grandmother staying put in a dying shrine, saying nothing. And the family drama is delivered like a shipping label on a consumable. Killing Emma early is one of those moments where Dark Souls 3 quietly checks whether you understand what kind of game you're playing. Mechanically, it's simple. You attack her, she drops the Basin of Vows, the bell tolls, and the Dancer of the Boreal Valley descends far earlier than the game ever expects you to see her. Emma was never a traditional gatekeeper. She's a caretaker performing a ritual, waiting for the right moment when the Lords of Cinder have definitively failed. Her job isn't to prevent the end, it's to recognize it. So when you kill her, you aren't sequence breaking in the usual video game sense. You're declaring the end of the age yourself. And that is why the Dancer shows up. She is an executioner tied to inevitability. Her lore makes it clear she was once of royal blood, twisted into a dancer by Pontiff Sullivan, and bound to the bell that signals collapse. That bell is supposed to toll when the world is ready to fall apart. By killing Emma, you bring it early. The game takes that seriously. The Dancer isn't scaled for early game characters. Her damage, health, reach, and most importantly, her delayed, offbeat attack timings are built for players who have already internalized DS3's faster, Bloodborne-influenced combat rhythm. If you fight her early, the difficulty spike isn't an oversight. It's the cost of acting out of order. The arena reinforces that something is wrong. It's huge, empty, ceremonial. No soldiers rush in, no NPC comments on what you've done. It feels like you've wandered into a moment that wasn't meant to exist yet, not because the game forbids it, but because the world hasn't decayed enough to justify it. Winning that fight early demands late-game discipline. You have to learn patience over aggression, spacing over greed, stamina control under pressure. These are lessons DS3 usually teaches slowly through attrition. Here it dumps them on you all at once and asks if you're willing to pay the price. And even if you win, the game doesn't congratulate you. Beating the Dancer early drops you into Lothric Castle far ahead of schedule, surrounded by enemies, damage numbers, and visual language that clearly belong to a later chapter. It doesn't feel like a reward. It feels like exposure. You're seeing the future before you're equipped to survive it, which lines up perfectly with DS3's core theme. The game is obsessed with timing, things happening too late, duties abandoned, rituals performed after their meaning has rotted away. The early dancer fight shows the opposite failure mode, things happening too soon. Either way, the result is suffering. The Mound Makers are one of those covenants that only make sense once you stop thinking of them as a faction at all. Mound Makers are mad spirits, oathless killers who exist completely outside of normal covenant logic. Their goal isn't victory, protection, or even progression. Their goal is death itself, and it genuinely does not matter whose. And Dark Souls 3 makes sure you understand that from the moment you try to join them. The earliest way to become a Mound Maker happens in the Undead Settlement, and it's absurdly easy to miss. On your way toward the Cursed Greatwood, there's a hollow shambling around with a massive, hanging cage on his back. Every soul's instinct tells you to kill him, and that is the trap. If you don't kill him, if you walk behind the cage and interact with it, the game quietly pulls the floor out from under you and drops you into the Pit of Hollows, a hidden burial ground beneath the settlement. Down there, waiting among the corpses, is a holy knight Hodrick, and Hodrick doesn't test you. He simply offers you a place among the Mound Makers, and if you accept, you're given the Covenant item on the spot. That's it. No boss, no ritual, just a choice. What makes this especially cruel is what happens if you miss it. If you kill the Cursed Greatwood before finding the cage, the pit becomes inaccessible permanently. The game doesn't warn you, it doesn't give you a second chance. It just closes the door. Dark Souls 3 is very deliberately punishing players who rush forward without curiosity. If you miss the early path, there is a second way to join, but it is fundamentally different. Much later, after defeating Aldrich and reaching the untended graves, you encounter another version of Hodrick. This time, he's hostile. You fight him, you kill him. Then, when you return to the Pit of Hollows and pray at the shrine, the Covenant is granted retroactively. Notice the difference. Early on, you choose to join Hodrick. Later, you inherit his role after killing him. Either way, the Covenant is tied to him. Hodrick is one of the most thematically important NPCs in Dark Souls 3. He invades you, he can be summoned, he kills allies, he betrays hosts. He is chaos made flesh, which makes him the perfect representative of the Mound Makers. Because once you're part of the Covenant, the rules fall apart. There's no moral framing, no right target, no protection clause. The Covenant doesn't care why someone died, only that another body has been added to the pile. And that's exactly what the name implies. Mound Makers don't build alliances. They build heaps of corpses. Meaning is created through accumulation, not purpose. That's also why joining them is hidden, fragile, and narratively uncomfortable. From Software doesn't want you to stumble into this Covenant by accident. It's easy to lock yourself out, easy to misunderstand, easy to regret. Because Mound Makers aren't meant to feel heroic. The Cursed Greatwood feels wrong on purpose, and the game never tries to hide that. The Cursed Greatwood feels wrong on purpose, and the game never tries to hide that. It's a rotting object that finally reached the point where all the garbage stuffed into it started pushing back. Everything about how it fights reinforces that. The Greatwood attacks don't look skilled or intentional. They look like reflexes, pressure releases, structural failure. When it lobs those swollen sacks at you, it's not aiming. They're cursed tumors, grown from generations of the undead settlement, dumping their fear, superstition, and executions onto the tree. The townsfolk believed curses could be transferred, so they nailed bodies to it, hung the dead from it, buried their sins in it. Eventually, the curses didn't stay abstract. They became physical. So when the Greatwood throws those sacks, it is literally expelling built-up rot, like an infected body rupturing under its own pressure. That's why the throws feel clumsy, why the arcs are awkward, why the sacks burst messily instead of exploding cleanly. There's no technique there, just decay reacting. The second phase makes that even clearer. Once the floor gives out and the fight drops into the pit, the Greatwood loses what stability it had left. The infamous belly flop isn't a slam, it's a collapse. The animation is slow, heavy, uncontrolled, not aggressive, just massive. A corpse falling because gravity finally wins. Mechanically, that forces you to keep repositioning, to chase unstable weak points, to deal with an arena that keeps reshaping itself under you. Narratively, it's saying something blunt. This thing should not be standing at all. And then there's the death animation, which is one of the most telling in the game. If you kill the Grellwood while parts of it are still intact, it doesn't die like a boss. There's no final roar, no dramatic posture. It just caves in on itself. The remaining sacks of rupture, the body folds inward. The curses burst as the structure finally gives way. The animation makes it clear that this was never a creature waiting to be slain. It was a load-bearing object that finally rotted through. Killing it isn't a victory, it's the inevitable outcome of neglect. And that mirrors the undead settlement perfectly. It buried fear instead of dealing with it. The Greatwood is what happens when you keep stacking problems in one place and hope they stay quiet forever. Even mechanically, the fight teaches that lesson. You're not meant to duel it. You're meant to identify rot, exploit it, and survive the mess. The two Crystal Sages aren't just another case of From Software reusing a boss. They're a continuation of a very specific failure. There are two of them, one haunting the Crucifixion Woods, the other entrenched in the Grand Archives. And while they wear nearly identical robes and fling the same crystal sorceries, the game is very clear that this isn't coincidence or convenience. They are explicit successors to Big Hat Logan. The Crystal Sages staff outright states that the Crystal Sages inherited crystal sorcery after Logan's era. That's not a metaphor, that's lineage. Logan is positioned as the origin point of their school, the moment crystal sorcery stopped being a curiosity and became a doctrine. And if you remember Logan's story in Dark Souls 1, that's not reassuring. Logan starts out as the kindly sorcerer, brilliant, absent-minded, genuinely excited about knowledge. But his arc doesn't end with enlightenment. It ends with isolation, obsession, and humiliation. He strips himself of dignity in Seath's archives, chasing crystal knowledge long past the point where it's doing anything but hollowing him out. The Crystal Sages are what happens after that story becomes tradition. They are disciples repeating a mistake because it's all they were taught. And while the game never actually explicitly calls them siblings, it goes out of its way to make them feel unnervingly alike. Same hunched posture, same proportions, same movements, same silhouette. In Dark Souls, that level of physical similarity usually means shared origin or deliberate transformation. More important than their bodies, though, is their behavior. Both rely on crystal sorcery to an almost pathological degree. Illusionary duplicates, spatial confusion, overwhelming magical pressure instead of adaptability or creativity. They don't react so much as they persist, flooding the space with crystals until either you're dead or they are. That mirrors Logan's final state perfectly. By the end of his life, crystal knowledge wasn't something Logan used. It was something he was trapped inside. And crystal sorcery throughout the series is consistently associated with rigidity, crystallization of thought, loss of self, preservation instead of growth. So the Crystal Sages aren't mad in a theatrical way. They're mad in a quieter, sadder way, stuck, repeating patterns, incapable of leaving the path they committed to. That's why the two encounters feel so different. The Crystal Sage in the Crucifixion Woods is erratic, defensive, unstable, still mobile, still reacting, still somewhat embedded in the outside world. The one in the Grand Archives is heavier, stronger, more entrenched, less interested in anything beyond maintaining control of the knowledge space it occupies. It feels like a later stage of the same decay, different points along the same trajectory. And that answers the uncomfortable question of why students of the kindly sorcerer end up as hostile obstacles, because Big Hat Logan was only kindly at the beginning, preserved in crystal until it stops being inquiry and becomes compulsion. As your character accumulates dark sigils and drifts closer to full hollowing, the way light interacts with your body subtly changes. In places where a clear shadow would be cast, it might look thin, fragmented, or just gone entirely. Not always, not everywhere, just enough to make you second guess what you're sensing. If the shadow vanished 100% of the time, players would flag it as a bug or a toggle. If it never vanished, it wouldn't matter. But because it only happens under certain lighting conditions, the effect feels environmental rather than mechanical, like the world itself is struggling to register you properly. That lines up disturbingly well with what hollowing is in Dark Souls 3. A shadow is proof that you exist physically in a space. Losing it, even partially, implies something about you no longer fully belongs to the world. And Dark Souls 3 is obsessed with that idea. Firelink Shrine's bonfire, burning brighter, is a quiet but deliberate signal that Dark Souls 3 uses to communicate progress and consequence without words. As you return Lords of Cinder to their thrones, the Firelink bonfire subtly changes. Its flame grows taller, wider, and more intense. There's no pop-up explaining this, and no stat tied to it, but it's consistent enough to be intentional. What's happening thematically is simple and unsettling. Every lord you defeat was once a being who linked the fire. When their ashes are placed on the thrones, that power is not destroyed. It is reabsorbed into the system that sustains the Age of Fire. Firelink Shrine, as the ritual center of that system, responds. The brighter flame does not mean hope, it means pressure. You are forcing more fuel into a fire that has already burned far too long. This fits Dark Souls 3's central tension. The fire can still burn, but only by consuming more and more of what once lived. Firelink Shrine also keeps score of how you treat it, and the Shrine Handmaiden is the clearest proof of that. If you kill her, she doesn't stay dead. She comes back. She just reappears behind the counter like nothing happened. But the game does remember that you did, because every time she respawns, her shop prices go up. It's not subtle. Armor costs more, consumables cost more, upgrade materials cost more. The exact percentage isn't spelled out in-game, but players quickly notice the pattern. Kill her, pay extra. Do it again, pay even more. Dark Souls 3 is basically saying, you're allowed to do this, but you're not allowed to pretend it didn't happen. The handmaiden is bound to Firelink. She can't leave, she can't retaliate, she can't refuse service. So instead of locking you out or failing a quest, the game lets the world respond economically, and it gets better. If you feel bad about it later, or just tired of overpaying, you can seek absolution, pray, atone, wipe the slate clean, and her prices return to normal. The contrast matters, because not every handmaid works this way. In the Untended Graves, the dark mirror of Firelink, the handmaid there is different. If you kill her, she doesn't come back. No respawn, no rising prices. She's just gone. Which tells you something really important about Firelink Shrine itself. Firelink is a place of cycles, rituals, and binding rules. People there persist whether they want to or not. The shrine handmaid isn't protected because she's important. She's protected because she's part of the structure. You can abuse that structure, but the cost gets passed on to you. High Lord Wolnir only makes full sense once you stop expecting him to behave like a pyromancer and start paying attention to what he's afraid of. When you actually fight him, there's almost no fire involved at all. He doesn't hurl flames, doesn't channel chaos, doesn't even posture like a spellcaster. Instead, everything he does is heavy, physical, and necromantic. He crushes you with skeletal arms. He drags a corrupted sword through the dark. He vomits that thick, black fog that doesn't burn. That fog is the giveaway. It's abyssal pressure replacing heat. And that's not because Wolnir was never tied to fire. It's because he walked away from it. The game quietly confirms this in two places. First, Wolnir's soul can be transposed into black flame, its fire corrupted by the abyss. You don't get that from someone who never touched flame. You get it from someone whose relationship with fire went wrong. The second confirmation is even more explicit. The Grave Warden Pyromancy Tome, found right in Wolnir's boss room, states outright that he was once a pyromancer king. At some point, he abandoned that identity and became a grave warden instead, choosing dominion over death rather than flame. That choice is the center of his story. Wolnir feared the abyss. The item descriptions make that painfully clear. Those golden bracelets you smashed during the fight aren't just gameplay gimmicks. They're holy relics meant to ward off darkness. He wrapped himself in protection, tried to keep the abyss out, and in doing so, gave up the very thing that once kept it at bay. Fire in Dark Souls is change, consumption, and renewal. It burns things down so something else can exist afterward. Death is the opposite. It preserves. It stagnates. It freezes a kingdom in place. Wolnir rejected it, hoping death would be safer, more stable, more controlled. And it failed. That's why the abyss takes him anyway. His kingdom collapses into the catacombs. His body is dragged into darkness. His fire doesn't vanish. It curdles into black flame, a version of pyromancy that no longer renews, only corrupts. I completely missed this on my first playthrough. Just saw a big skeleton with a gimmick fight and moved on. It wasn't until later, when I actually read the Pyromancy tome sitting right there in the room, that it hit me. Wolnir isn't a lord who never used fire. He's a lord who lost his nerve. One of the meanest little cameos in Dark Souls 3 shows up when you're least expecting it, and it starts out almost funny. You're down in the profaned capital, poking around near a bonfire, and you spot something familiar, a ladder, just sitting there, leading up an awkward vertical stretch, and right next to it, a corpse, slumped over, completely silent. That corpse is Gilligan. Yeah, that Gilligan, the ladder merchant from Dark Souls 2. This isn't a vague Easter egg or a looks kind of similar situation. The body drops Gilligan's clothes. That's the game planting the flag. Same guy, same hunched little survivor, and the placement is the joke. He's dead next to a ladder, the one thing that defined him, the one problem he was always good at solving. In Dark Souls 2, Gilligan was this practical, slightly comedic NPC. Nervous voice, hunched posture, always ready to sell you a ladder, just long enough to get somewhere dangerous. A guy who made a living helping others survive vertical death. Dark Souls 3 takes that memory and twists the knife. Here, Gilligan isn't selling anything. He isn't part of a quest. He isn't talking. The ladder is already placed. His job has been automated. His usefulness exhausted. The world didn't need him anymore, so it kept the ladder and discarded the man. And mechanically, that's important. You still use the ladder. It still helps you. You benefit from Gilligan's work, just not from Gilligan himself. Firelink teaches you early that Dark Souls 3 remembers the past in a really nasty way. Like with Gilligan, the ladder guy from Dark Souls 2, who shows up in Dark Souls 3 as a corpse slumped next to a ladder in the profaned capital. It's the game's way of saying even the helpful little people get turned into set dressing eventually. And that mindset is exactly why Smoldering Lake hits the way it does. Because this place isn't a secret area that feels like bonus content. It feels like you physically fell through the floor of the current world and landed in something that shouldn't even be reachable anymore. To get there, you don't open a door or find a key. You break a bridge. That rickety bridge near Wolnir's bonfire looks like a normal traversal piece until you realize it is meant to collapse. And once it drops, it becomes a ladder down to the depths. Like the game is literally turning progress into descent. I still remember my first time doing it. I thought I had made a mistake, like, cool, I just deleted my only way forward. Then I noticed you could climb down. 10 seconds later, I'm in a huge underground cavern, and an automated ballista starts firing spears the size of tree trunks at my face. Immediate panic, immediate laughter, immediate realization of, oh, this is a place the game expects me to stumble into, not arrive at politely. Down there, Smoldering Lake spreads out like a hidden landfill of the world's oldest problems. A massive ballista that forces you to navigate the terrain under artillery fire. Scattered loot that feels almost baited into danger. Enemies like demons, skeletons, black knights, and those smoldering Gru types. And at the far end, an optional boss, the Old Demon. Structurally, it's just an optional zone under the catacombs, and the Old Demon King seals the vibe. He doesn't feel like a triumphant ruler. He feels like one of the last big embers still burning because nothing told him he was allowed to stop. Painful, yes, but weary. Like a relic that outlived the age that made it matter. That's why Smoldering Lake feels so heavy the first time you reach it. Another place Dark Souls 3 treats like a cruel little if you know callback is Archdragon Peak, because it doesn't let you walk there like a normal area. It makes you earn the right to even perceive it. You don't find a key or flip a lever. You don't even discover it in the usual video game sense. You have to go off the main road and kill Osiris in the Consumed King's Garden, which is already optional and hidden behind the whole Dancer Lothric Castle progression. Then, after Osiris, you reach that quiet room with a corpse holding the path of the Dragon Jester. And the Jester isn't a cute emote. It is a literal progression item. You take it back to Irithyll Dungeon, head toward that dragon-like corpse in the meditative pose, and do the gesture on the little rug. No boss fog, no prompt that screams new area unlocked. You just sit, stillness, imitation, and devotion. Then the game yanks you out of normal space, because it's basically the series' dragon obsession distilled into a mechanic. The Path of the Dragon concept goes all the way back to the Dragon Covenant stuff. This idea that you don't reach dragons by traveling like a tourist. You reach them by attuning to them. In DS3, it's taken further. You aren't going there because you found it. You're going there because you performed the correct ritual. I remember the first time I did it. I honestly thought I was wasting my time, like, okay, cool, I'm doing the funny sit pose for lore reasons. Then the cutscene triggered, and I had that exact Souls moment of, wait, that was real? It felt like the game rewarding not skill, but relevance. Or maybe punishing it. Hard to tell with Dark Souls. And when you get there, you've got ancient stone architecture, lighting everywhere, and enemies that aren't really dragon citizens. They're devotees, acolytes, guardians, people wearing dragonness like a uniform. Even the true dragons you encounter in the vibe of the place feel more like fossils, relics, or godlike presences than a living society just hanging out. That fits the long-running Souls idea that dragons aren't thriving. They're largely gone, and what remains is worship, imitation, and power theft. Archdragon Peak is basically what happens when that obsession becomes a whole zone, a mountain-sized shrine to transcendence, guarded by people who aren't dragons, but desperately want to be close enough to pretend. The final boss of Archdragon Peak is one of the hardest fights in Dark Souls 3, the Nameless King. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this guy absolutely wrecked me the first time I reached him. The delayed attacks, the lightning timings, the sheer pressure of Phase 2. The world building and lore is peak Dark Souls. Nameless King is almost certainly Gwyn's firstborn son, the erased god of war the series has been hinting at since Dark Souls 1. This isn't a vibes-based story. It's one of the strongest lore conclusions the series supports. Back in Dark Souls 1, the game explicitly tells us that Gwyn had a firstborn, a god of war associated with lightning. Item descriptions make it clear this figure existed, wielded sunlight miracles, and was later stripped of his name and status. His statuses were destroyed. His legacy was deliberately erased. Then, Dark Souls 3 introduces the Nameless King, and almost every detail lines up too cleanly to ignore. Let's start with the lightning. His miracles are precise, delayed, and devastating, and his combat rhythm deliberately mirrors Gwyn's own fight from DS1. Same posture, same authority, same feeling that you're fighting someone who doesn't need to rush you because they already control the battlefield. This is Sunlight's lineage. Then there's the dragon connection. The Nameless King rides the King of the Storm, fights alongside a dragon, and rules over Archdragon Peak, a place dedicated to dragon worship and transcendence. That directly mirrors Dark Souls 1 lore, stating that Gwyn's firstborn betrayed the gods by siding with dragons. That betrayal is the reason his name was erased in the first place. Which brings us to the most on-the-nose detail of all. His name, or rather lack thereof. He isn't called a lord, he isn't called a god, he isn't even called fallen or exiled. He is simply the Nameless King. The punishment described in DS1 wasn't death, it was erasure, loss of name, loss of identity, and DS3 doesn't undo that punishment. It honors it by never restoring his name at all. Even the miracle lineage supports this. In DS1, Sunlight Blade and early Sunlight miracles are tied to Gwyn's firstborn. In Dark Souls 3, lightning faith traditions trace back to the Nameless King's influence. His followers wield ancient sunlight doctrine. The sun's symbolism never leaves him. At a certain point, the convergence becomes undeniable. There's no other character in the trilogy who fits the lightning god role, matches the dragon betrayal, bears an erased identity, mirrors Gwyn's combat lineage, and exists outside the god's domain. Introducing the Nameless King without tying him to Gwyn's firstborn would create a duplicate myth the series never needed. Instead, Dark Souls 3 resolves the mystery the way Dark Souls always does, by letting the truth exist without ever being spoken. And here's the most important part. The Nameless King isn't framed as a villain. He's calm, he's honorable, and solitary. He doesn't rant, he doesn't conquer, he doesn't chase the flame. He aligns himself with the very creatures the gods tried to exterminate. Gwyn feared the end of fire and sacrificed everything to delay it. His son rejected that path entirely. That ideological split is why he was erased, not because he was weak, but because he was right too early. And that's why he's optional. You don't need to fight him to finish the game. You don't need to know the truth to link or end the fire. But if you go out of the way, if you meditate instead of marching forward, If you step off the path laid out for you, you find it. Another relic from the past shows up at Archdragon Peak, and like most things in Dark Souls 3, it isn't announced. It's just there, daring you to recognize it. Deep in the area, you can encounter an enemy wearing Havel's set, wielding Havel's great shield and the dragon tooth. No dialogue, no name, no fanfare, but the silhouette is unmistakable. This is Havel, or something that has become of him. And that distinction matters, because the game is very careful about what it does not say. Dark Souls 3 never explicitly confirms this is Havel the Rock from Dark Souls 1. What it does confirm is that this figure carries Havel's unique gear that has always been singular and symbolic. In this series, equipment like that doesn't drift randomly, so the cleanest reading is also the most Souls-accurate one. This is either Havel himself or someone who fully inherited his function and purpose. What makes that reveal sting is where he's found. In Dark Souls 1, Havel's entire identity revolved around hatred of dragons. Item descriptions tell us he despised them, opposed their worship, and allied with the gods in the ancient war. His weapons weren't elegant, they were blunt, stone instruments designed to crush dragons through sheer force. Havel wasn't subtle, he was resolute. Archdragon Peak is the exact opposite of everything he stood for. It's a place of dragon reverence, a ritual site devoted to transcendence through imitation, a domain ruled by the Nameless King, a figure who rejected the gods and sided with dragons instead. Lightning crackles everywhere, dragon acolytes kneel, ancient stone rises toward the sky, and in the middle of all that stands Havel, not raging, not preaching, not leading a crusade, just standing there, hostile, silent, still fighting. That's the quiet tragedy. The world changed around him. Ages collapsed into each other, enemies became myths, and dragon worship resurfaced in a new form. And Havel is still swinging the same stone weapon at the same ancient idea. Dark Souls 3 is obsessed with callbacks, but not the comfortable kind. You see it in places, in people, in objects that shouldn't still matter, and sometimes you see it in something as small as a pose. That's where Anri's Quiet Resolve emote comes in, because that stance isn't new. It's a direct visual echo of one of the most important images in Dark Souls history. Back in Dark Souls 1's early trailers and promotional material, there was a now iconic image, a lone knight kneeling or resting, sword planted in the ground, head bowed. No victory, just exhaustion, and the decision to keep going anyway. That image wasn't tied to any named character. It was symbolic. It told you what Dark Souls was before you ever played it. Endurance instead of triumph, resolve without hope, survival without promise. Dark Souls 3 brings that image back. The Quiet Resolve emote is slow and still. The sword is planted, the head is lowered. There's no motion beyond breathing. From Software doesn't reuse emotionally loaded poses by accident, especially ones that communicate tone rather than mechanics. This isn't just kneeling with a sword. It's the same visual language, deliberately transplanted into gameplay. And the fact that it comes from Anri matters. Anri isn't a grand hero. They aren't trying to save the world or rewrite the cycle. Their story is about persistence in the face of loss, and continuing even when every outcome feels hollow. They just keep moving forward, because stopping would mean surrendering. So when Anri gives you Quiet Resolve, it's a handing down of the series' original emotional posture. One of the quietest, most brutal moments in Dark Souls 3's quest design comes from Anri and Horace, and it's a detail a lot of people half remember, usually a little wrong because of how rare it is to actually see. If Horace is killed while Anri is physically present, Anri doesn't keep fighting, they just stop. Combat ceases and Anri collapses in despair. No animation flourish, no melodrama, just the body language of someone whose reason for standing vanished mid-battle. That's the closest Dark Souls 3 ever gets to showing an NPC surrender emotionally, and it's fully scripted, not random. It's not a mood state, it's the game saying this bond mattered enough to break them. Most players never see this. In a normal playthrough, Horace is found hollow down in Smoldering Lake, long separated from Anri. You usually kill him alone, in silence. Later, when you return to Anri and tell them what happened, they don't collapse, but they do grieve. The dialogue is subdued, restrained, and painful in that very Dark Souls way where no one lets themselves fall apart all the way. I remember the first time I told Anri about Horace. I expected anger, resolve, or maybe some revenge speech. Instead, I got this quiet acknowledgement that felt heavier than any cutscene. It didn't feel like a quest update. It felt like I'd just delivered bad news to someone who already knew, deep down, what it meant. But another special thing about Anri is that their quest is also integral for getting the secret ending of Dark Souls 3. The one officially known as the Lord of Hollows ending, and this is where Dark Souls 3 quietly reveals just how cruel it's willing to be about player choice. This ending isn't hidden behind a single decision at the end of the game. It's built across the entire playthrough, and one wrong act of mercy permanently destroys it. To make it possible, you first have to accept Yol of Londor. He's easy to miss, slumped on a broken bridge early in the high wall of Lothric. And if you walk past him or let him die before helping him, the ending is already gone. That's how fragile this path is. Once Yol reaches Firelink, he offers to draw out your true strength. What that actually means is giving you dark sigils, one at a time, by letting you die and hollow further. You need 5 of them, and this is critical. You cannot cure your hollowing. Not once. Not out of curiosity, not to fix your character. Dark Souls 3 is doing something very intentional here. It's asking you to accept decay, instead of resisting it. After you've drawn out all 5 dark sigils and progressed far enough, Yol dies naturally. If he dies before you get all 5, the path collapses. If you healed hollowing before he dies, again it collapses. And then, Yuria of Londor appears. She doesn't ask if you understand what's happening. She assumes you've already committed. From this point on, she becomes the architect of the ending, and Anri becomes the price. Anri's quest now matters more than any other NPC in the game. You still meet Anri throughout your journey, still talk, still share goals, but in Irithyll, there's a turning point. An assassin hiding nearby. If you reveal that assassin, Anri survives, and the Lord of Hollows ending dies with it. To continue down this path, you must do nothing. You allow Anri to be guided by Londor. You allow them to hollow, and eventually, in the Dark Moon Chamber beneath Anor Londo, the truth becomes unavoidable. The wedding ritual isn't symbolic. Anri is already hollow. A blade is driven through their head, and you absorb their dark sigils. Saving Anri here cancels the ending. The only way forward is to let them die, in service of a future they'll never see. And the game never tells you this is right. From there on, the rules are absolute. Never remove the dark sigils, never cure hollowing, never betray Yuria. You finish the game normally, defeat the soul of Cinder, and when you approach the first flame, something different happens. The Firekeeper does not intervene. The flame does not surge. It bows. Hollows kneel before you. Yuria names you Lord of Hollows. This is the only ending where the player is crowned. The only ending where NPCs swear allegiance. The only ending where the Age of Fire is neither linked nor gently ended. Dark Souls 3 gives you multiple endings, and all of them branch from the same quiet moment. After you defeat the Soul of Cinder and stand before the first flame of the kiln, what you've done throughout the game and how you chose to act right there determines which future the world slides into. There are 4 outcomes in total, 3 core endings plus 1 darker variant hidden inside of them. You can link the first flame, and this is the most straightforward ending, and the one most players see first. After defeating the Soul of Cinder, you simply interact with the first flame yourself without completing the Londor questline. Your character kneels, burns, and becomes fuel for the fire, another Lord of Cinder added to the pile. Thematically, this ending feels deliberately hollow, pun intended. You're continuing Gwyn's ancient bargain, but Dark Souls 3 makes it clear the fire is weak. You're keeping a failing system alive for just a little longer. The world doesn't heal, it merely postpones collapse. The end of fire. This ending requires more curiosity. You must find the eyes of a Firekeeper in the untended graves and give them to the Firekeeper at Firelink Shrine. After the Soul of Cinder, instead of touching the bonfire yourself, you summon the Firekeeper. She takes the flame into her hands and lets it fade, plunging the world into darkness. This is the game's quiet rebellion against tradition. Rather than sacrificing yourself to prolong a dying age, you allow the cycle to end. The future is left intentionally ambiguous, not framed as doom, but as possibility. Dark Souls 3 refused to tell you whether the Age of Dark will be better, only that it will be different. You can take the first flame. This is a secret twist on the end of fire. You follow the same steps, eyes of a Firekeeper, summon her after the final boss, but at the very last moment, you attack her while she's holding the flame. You kill her and take the flame for yourself. The ending is brief but brutal and unsettling. It rejects both sacrifice and mercy. You don't link the fire and you don't let it fade. You seize it. The game offers no achievement for this path, and that feels intentional. It's not presented as triumph, but as a raw act of possession and greed. This is the most complex and most state-dependent ending. To unlock it, you have to complete the Londor questline. You recruit Yul, accept Hollowing and Yuria to guide you, perform the ritual involving Anri, and never remove your dark sigils. By the time you reach the end, the game already treats you differently. NPCs and even DLC characters recognize you as Londor's lord. After defeating the Soul of Cinder, you interact with the first flame yourself. It looks like you're linking it, until the twist hits. Instead of burning away, you rise again, having claimed the flame rather than fed it. This ending reframes the entire cycle. You don't preserve the Age of Fire, and you don't gently end it, you override it. Londor's vision replaces the old order, with hollows no longer as refuse, but as rulers. One of the most deliberate moments in Dark Souls 3 happens right when the Soul of Cinder enters Phase 2. As Phase 2 begins, the soundtrack pivots into a piano motif that directly echoes Gwyn's theme from Dark Souls 1. The piece everyone knows as Pling Pling Plong, and that's not a coincidence, and it isn't subtle once you notice it. The music is a quotation, not just a vibe. Dark Souls 3 is intentionally pulling a fragment of Gwyn's melody into its final boss, and it does it at the exact moment the fight changes tone. The timing matters, and the same time the piano comes in, the Soul of Cinder's behavior shifts. The boss becomes more aggressive, more relentless, more intimate, less spectacle, more pressure. It starts feeling familiar, not because the moves are identical, but because the energy is. That pairing is the trick. Audio recognition hits first. Your brain goes, wait, I know this. Then the movement reinforces it. Oh, this feels like him. And that's when the realization lands. You're not just fighting a final boss. You're fighting a memory of the first one. Lore-wise, it fits perfectly. The Soul of Cinder isn't a single person. It's a manifestation of every being who ever linked the fire, a living composite of the entire cycle. And Gwyn was the first to do it, the original Lord of Cinder, the one who set this whole system into motion. So when Phase 2 invokes Gwyn's theme, the game is telling you something without words. This is the cycle remembering itself, and the choice of music is cruel in the best way. Because I shed a single tear when I heard that iconic pling pling plong, remembering that this is the end of my journey in the world of Dark Souls. This one item can turn Dark Souls 3 into an honest-to-God hard mode. Not a slider, not New Game Plus, not a gimmick build, just a ring that says, everything hurts more now. The Calamity ring doesn't tweak enemy AI or scale numbers behind the scenes. It does something far more crueler and far more Souls-like. It removes your margin for error. Every hit you take is effectively doubled. Every mistake you could previously survive becomes fatal. Trades stop existing. Panic rolls get punished instantly. Even trash mobs regain teeth. Put simply, the game you already know becomes a different one. Dark Souls 3 is built around absorption, armor choices, buffs, positioning, timing. The Calamity reaches into that entire system and zeroes it out. By reducing all absorption by 100%, it invalidates your defenses. The player fantasy of gradually becoming sturdier is gone. You are always fragile, and one mistake away from death. And that's why it works so well as a hard mode. What makes this especially sharp is that the ring offers nothing in return. No damage boost, no scaling bonus, no hidden interaction. The game is extremely explicit about this. No useful powers. That's a design statement. Which brings us to why its placement matters. Archdragon Peak is the end of a pilgrimage. It's where dragon worshippers strip away modernity, armor, civilization, even self-preservation, in pursuit of something ancient and pure. The Calamity ring being found here isn't accidental. It's the mechanical expression of devotion without payoff. You kneel, you perform the gesture, and what you receive is a vow. From now on, the world will hurt you more. This is a direct echo of Dark Souls 1's Calamity ring, forged from Calamite's orange eye. Same idea, same cruelty. In both cases, it's about submission. You're willingly binding yourself to suffering to prove something, whether to the dragons, the world, or yourself. And that is why players actually use it. Another one of Dark Souls 3's strongest callbacks comes wrapped in an onion helmet. And if you thought From Software already peaked with Sigmar Katarina in Dark Souls 1, it turns out we were very, very wrong. Siegward of Katarina is not subtle. From the moment you meet him, the parallels are deliberate. Same Katarina armor, same gentle optimism, same habit of getting stuck thinking instead of acting, and popping up across the world like an old friend you keep running into. Just like Sigmar, he hides a real tragedy under humor and warmth. This isn't asset reuse, it's From Software using Katarina Knights as philosophical foils. They represent perseverance through kindness, loyalty, and stubborn decency in a world that punishes those traits. But here's the key thing Dark Souls 3 does differently. Siegward is not Sigmar. Where Sigmar was impulsive and well-meaning to a fault, Siegward is patient, deliberate. He doesn't rush in to help everyone. He's carrying a single responsibility, and everything else is secondary. That responsibility is Yhorm the Giant. This connection is not implied, it's explicit. Siegward tells you outright that he and Yhorm were once friends. They made a promise. If Yhorm ever became a Lord of Cinder and lost his way, Siegward would be the one to stop him. Yhorm's own lore backs this up perfectly. He became a Lord of Cinder to protect his people. They feared him anyway. He linked the fire knowing it wouldn't save them, and when everything failed, he abandoned his throne in despair. That is where Siegward comes in, as a promise keeper. The Storm Ruler isn't just a boss gimmick, it's part of that promise. Siegward carries one. Yhorm's arena contains another. And Siegward tells you plainly, only a storm can fell a giant. That means this ending was planned, anticipated, agreed upon. Yhorm didn't just expect to die, he expected to be stopped this way by the one person he trusted to do it. And Dark Souls 3 is ruthless about making you earn that moment. Siegward's quest spans half the game. Miss a step, rush ahead, fail to show compassion at the right time, and the payoff disappears. Siegward won't show up. Yhorm dies alone. The promise is broken. This isn't about player skill, it's about follow-through. But if you do everything right, Siegward joins the fight. He uses his Storm Ruler and speaks during the battle. And after Yhorm falls, Siegward doesn't go mad. He thanks you and then dies peacefully. And this is where Dark Souls 3 quietly honors Sigmar of Catarina. In Dark Souls 1, Sigmar tries to help people and often makes things worse. His good intentions spiral into failure. His story ends in despair and possibly hollowing to his daughter. It's tragic because Sigmar meant well but never quite understood when or how to act. Siegward is the answer to that tragedy. What if a Catarina knight helped once at the right moment, with clarity, not bravado? In a game about cycles that have gone on too long, vows that have lost meaning, and lords who refuse to return to their thrones, Siegward stands out because he does the opposite. He keeps his word, even when it kills him. And if you ever thought From Software couldn't top the emotional weight of Sigmar's quest in Dark Souls 1, Siegward proves they absolutely could. Siegward talks about Yhorm like a friend. That framing matters because it changes how you're supposed to understand everything about Yhorm the Giant, especially the fight itself. Yhorm wasn't driven to the throne by ambition or hunger for power. He became a Lord of Cinder because he believed sacrifice would protect his people. As a giant, he was feared long before he was hated, and item descriptions make it clear that his size alone was enough to make his people turn on him. Linking the fire was a desperate attempt to prove his worth, and it failed. The flame didn't save them. His people rejected him anyway, and when that truth settled in, Yhorm didn't lash out. He didn't rule through force. He walked away. He abandoned his throne and returned to the profaned capital, where he sat in isolation, waiting. That is the man Siegward made a promise to. If Yhorm ever lost his way as a Lord of Cinder, Siegward would be the one to stop him, not out of hatred, not out of duty to the flame, but because someone had to be strong enough to end what Yhorm himself couldn't. That promise explains why Yhorm's fight feels so strange if you don't understand it. On a new game run, Yhorm has more total HP than any other boss in Dark Souls 3, more than Gale, Midir, or the Demon Princess. That isn't a mistake. It's the game telling you that this isn't a fight meant to be won through effort. Giants in Dark Souls are never worn down through normal means. Yhorm takes that idea to its extreme. He's not just a giant. He's the one who survived linking the first flame. His body isn't a creature anymore. It's a monument that refuses to fall. That is why the Storm Ruler exists. It's not a gimmick, it's part of the promise. Siegward carries one. Yhorm's arena contains another. Only a storm can fell a giant. That line matters because it tells you this ending was anticipated. Yhorm expected to be killed this way if he failed. He prepared the weapon, accepted the outcome, and entrusted it to the one person he believed would do it without cruelty. If Siegward is there, the fight stops being about conquest entirely. He joins you, he speaks to Yhorm as an equal, and uses the Storm Ruler not in rage, but in fulfillment. When Yhorm falls, Siegward doesn't celebrate. He thanks you, and then dies peacefully, his vow complete. One thing Dark Souls 3 does incredibly consistently is structure its NPCs around the failure of the Lords of Cinder. Nearly every major character you meet exists because a lord refused, abandoned, or broke their duty. The game doesn't spell it out, but once you notice it, the entire cast snaps into focus. The Lords of Cinder are the axis everything turns on. The Abyss Watchers, Yhorm the Giant, Aldrich, Devourer of Gods, and Prince Lothric with Lorien. Each of them walked away from the throne, and the world responded by creating people to deal with the aftermath. Siegward of Catarina is the clearest example. His entire journey leads to Yhorm. He was Yhorm's friend. He made a promise, and he kept it. Every step of Siegward's quest exists for that single moment in the profaned capital. Without Yhorm's refusal, Siegward has no reason to exist in the story. Anri of Astoria and Horace are shaped by Aldrich. They are survivors of his atrocities, and Anri says as much. Their pilgrimage ends in Anor Londo for one reason. Aldrich is still there. When Anri dies pursuing revenge or is consumed by the Londor ritual, Aldrich is the gravity pulling their entire life forward. Hawkwood is bound to the Abyss Watchers. He was part of the Undead Legion and deserted because he lacked the wolf's blood. His bitterness comes from failing to become what they valued. When the Watchers collapse into fighting and abandon their role, Hawkwood becomes the proof that their ideal always left people behind. Syrric exists in response to the spread of the Abyss. Her loyalty to order and opposition to Londor place her in direct philosophical conflict with what the Watchers became. She's a reaction to abyssal corruption rather than a servant to a specific lord. Lothric's refusal creates entire systems of NPCs. The Firekeeper's role only becomes meaningful because the linking has stalled. Her endings exist because Lothric refused to take the throne. Emma's entire purpose is to delay the inevitable. When she dies, the bell tolls, and the dancer arrives immediately. Her role ends the moment the age collapses. Londor exists because all of the lords fail. Yol and Yuria build power in the vacuum left behind. The Lord of Hollows ending only works because the system is broken enough to be hijacked. Londor doesn't oppose the cycle, it exploits it. Every secondary NPC follows the pattern. Greyrat's scavenging routes trace fallen kingdoms and abandoned strongholds. Carla's imprisonment reflects fear of dark knowledge in a world warped by Aldrich and the Abyss. Orbeck represents scholarship, pushed aside as corrupted divinity dominates Anor Londo again, and the exceptions stand out because they're consistent across ages. Andre exists regardless of which lord failed. The Shrine Handmaiden responds to ashes, not people. They represent the system continuing, even as everything else collapses. As you move through Farron Keep and get closer to the Abyss Watchers, something starts happening long before you ever see a fog wall. You hear them. Steel clashing, blades scraping armor, grunts, impacts, the sound of a fight already in progress. And that's not ambient noise. It's not generic combat audio. Dark Souls 3 is very deliberately telling you that the Abyss Watchers are already killing each other before you arrive. By the time you reach their arena, their war has been going on for who knows how long. The Abyss Watchers are a lord of Cinder, but they're also a legion, the Undead Legion of Farron, warriors sworn to hunt the Abyss wherever it appears. They modeled themselves after Artorias, took on the wolf's blood, and bound themselves to a single, absolute rule. Anything touched by the Abyss must be destroyed. That oath defined everything about them. Their armor, their fighting style, their covenant. They were exterminators, willing to bury entire lands at the first sign of corruption. And eventually, that oath turned inward. Farron Keep itself is rotting. The poison swamp is, poisonous. The land they swore to protect is saturated with the very darkness they hate. Over time, the wolf's blood that united them became tainted. Once even a few Watchers were touched by the Abyss, their own rules demanded a response. Kill anything touched by the Abyss, including each other. That's why you hear constant fighting near the arena. The battle never ends because their purpose never allowed it to end. There's no external enemy left, only Watchers judging Watchers. When you finally enter the boss room, the state of things makes sense immediately. Bodies are already on the ground. One Watcher rises to face you. Others slowly stand, some attacking you, some attacking their own. The corrupted Watchers, marked by glowing red eyes, don't care who they strike. Player, ally, legion brother, it's all the same. The fight turns into a three-way brawl because that is what the Legion has become. The Watchers inherited Artorias' legacy, but they also inherited his fate. Artorias was corrupted by the Abyss through obsession and endless battle. The Watchers took that obsession, multiplied it across an entire army, and made it eternal. By the time you reach the Twin Princes, Dark Souls 3 has already been telling their family story for hours, just never in one place, and never aloud. What is explicit is simple. Osiris was the king of Lothric, and Lorien and Lothric are his sons. The game never offers an alternative lineage, and every item description treats the princes as the unquestioned royal heirs. Father and sons is locked in. Where Dark Souls does what it always does, is with the mother. Nothing ever says her name, but the world keeps pointing to the same answer. Guinevere has always been the goddess of marriage, fertility, and royal lineage. In Dark Souls 1, she leaves Anor Londo and spreads divine blood into human dynasties. Her legacy isn't armies or crusades, it's bloodlines. Kings, heirs, and chosen children, who matter not because of strength, but because of what runs in their veins. Lothric is obsessed with that exact idea. The kingdom's entire identity revolves around light, miracles, and divine blood. Lothric knights wield sunlight miracles. The architecture echoes Anor Londo. The royal family is treated less like rulers and more like holy vessels. Prince Lothric isn't trained to fight. He's raised to inherit a role written into his blood before he's even born. That only works, though, if the blood is special. Osiris alone doesn't explain it. Guinevere does. Prince Lothric is described as of royal blood, destined for the flame. His entire value to the world is biological. He is chosen not for his will or his strength, but because his lineage makes him suitable to link the fire. That idea only holds weight if the lineage itself carries divinity forward. Osiris's madness reinforces this. His obsession isn't random. He fixates on Seath, on dragons, on immortality, and on the idea that lineage can be perfected. He raves on about his beloved child. He tries to force transcendence. That behavior makes sense if his family already carried divine blood, and it failed him. If his wife was a goddess, if his children were meant to be demigods, if one of them was born frail. Osiris reads like a man who believed destiny was guaranteed, and panicked when reality didn't match the promise. Instead of accepting failure, he chased immortality and lost himself completely, and Guinevere's absence fits perfectly. Dark Souls 3 consistently shows gods abandoning the worlds they share. They leave behind dynasties, expectations, and children forced to carry burdens they never asked for. Guinevere never stays to clean up the consequences of her bloodlines. She never did in Anor Londo, and she doesn't in Lothric either. That leaves the twin princes alone with the fallout. Lorien becomes the physical shield, a knight shaped by duty, scarred by past battles, bound eternally to his brother. Lothric becomes the intellectual refusal, frail, withdrawn, and fully aware that the cycle was born to perpetuate is meaningless. Together, they represent the final proof of that lineage. Yhorm's health bar is one of the loudest pieces of silent storytelling in Dark Souls 3. On a standard new game run, Yhorm the Giant has more total HP than any other boss in the entire game. That includes endgame monsters and DLC nightmares like Gale, Midir, and Demon Prince. This isn't hidden scaling, and it isn't a quirk that got patched out. It's consistent, deliberate, and permanent, and the game never expects you to chew through it. Aldrich is explicitly called the Devourer of Gods, and Gwyndolin is named among his victims. The game directly tells you that Aldrich is slowly devouring the god of the Dark Moon. Slowly is the key word here. You don't see a complete body because there isn't one anymore. You see a sludge entity that has engulfed a god and is wearing him like a half-finished meal. The lower half is pure Aldrich, shapeless, viscous, inhuman. The upper half is familiar, fragile, almost ceremonial. That contrast is intentional. The fight itself reinforces this without a single line of dialogue. Aldrich uses Gwyndolin's magic, the homing arrow rain, the dark moon-style sorceries, the ceremonial posture. He absorbs power, memories, and dreams. One miracle even states outright that Aldrich dreamed while devouring the god of the Dark Moon, and that dream became part of his magic. That is horrifying when you stop to think about it. He's being repurposed. Even Aldrich's soul hints at this, describing something smaller and golden within the mass, commonly understood as the soul of the god being consumed. That's why the wording matters. Aldrich isn't using Gwyndolin's body as a shield in some tactical sense. What's happening is worse and more intimate. He has engulfed Gwendolyn and is in the process of consuming him, while simultaneously manifesting the abilities that consumption grants. You aren't fighting Aldrich and Gwendolyn. You're fighting Aldrich through Gwendolyn. And that fits perfectly with Dark Souls 3's version of decay. Gods don't fall in battle anymore. They're eaten, absorbed, turned into fuel for something that doesn't even care what they used to be. By the time you kill Aldrich, Gwendolyn isn't saved. He's already gone. If you ever slow down and really look at Ludleth of Courland, Dark Souls 3 quietly reveals one of its bleakest character studies, and it hides most of it behind an action the game never encourages you to take, killing him. If you kill Ludleth in Firelink Shrine and then reload the area, something strange happens. His body is back in his throne. He isn't hostile. He isn't resurrected in a normal soul sense. He is asleep, and he talks to himself. Very few NPCs in the game do anything after death at all, and Ludleth is one of the only ones who both returns and speaks from a dream state. That alone should set off alarms. When he murmurs, it's not pride or ritual language. He sounds distressed. He references burning. He speaks like someone reliving pain rather than remembering a triumph. The delivery matters more than the words. It's someone trapped in a memory his body never let go of. He's dreaming about linking the fire. And if you trigger this after defeating the Dragon Slayer armor, he adds even more lines. That timing isn't random. The Dragon Slayer armor guards the path to the Grand Archives, a place tied to forbidden knowledge, heresy, and the truth behind the flame. Only after you cross that threshold does Ludleth reveal more of what's buried in his mind. What makes this hit harder is who Ludleth actually is. He is a Lord of Cinder, the only one who returned to his throne willingly. The only one who didn't flee, refuse, or collapse. Item descriptions confirm he linked the fire knowing exactly what it would cost him. Courland is gone, his kingdom erased, his body crippled, and he stayed anyway. Other lords reacted differently. Yhorm abandoned the throne. The Abyss Watchers burned together and tore themselves apart. Aldrich devoured gods and fled. Lothric refused entirely. Ludleth remained. He even says he's proud of what he did. And the dream dialogue doesn't contradict that. It deepens it. Dark Souls 3 is showing something much harsher. You can believe a choice was necessary and still be shattered by it. His pride is intellectual, his trauma is physical. That's why he can't stand, why he never leaves the shrine, and why he dreams of fire, even after death. There's also that strange line he gives about having painted a new vision of the world. The language echoes the painted worlds, but the game never ties him to Ariandel or Arianos. The safest reading is metaphorical. Ludleth believes linking the fire reshaped reality itself, that his suffering brought continuation, even if that continuation is flawed. There's another small but very real mechanical detail hiding in the stray demon fight that a lot of players miss entirely. You can break his leg. During the fight on the bridge above Farron Keep, repeatedly attacking one of the stray demon's legs, most players hit the right leg just because of positioning, will eventually cause it to fail. When that happens, the animation sells it completely. The demon staggers, then it collapses, fully immobilized. You get a massive damage window, and it's not a scripted phase change or a gimmick trigger. It's the result of localized damage accumulation. After it recovers, the fight is permanently altered. The demon moves slowly, has reduced stability, and is much easier to punish for the rest of the encounter. Dark Souls 3 also does something insanely nerdy with the twin princes that most people don't even realize is possible until they stumble into it. You can literally fuse 2 boss soul weapons into a third. It's the twins' entire story turned into a weapon art. From the twin prince's soul, you can transpose 2 different swords, Lothric's Holy Sword and Lorien's Greatsword. They both come from the same boss soul. Normally, you need 2 playthroughs to get both on a single character file. Unless you trade with another player, you're doing the whole beat the game again lap just to complete the set. But then comes the part I love. If you have both swords in your inventory and talk to Ludleth and Firelink, you get an extra transposition option. He'll forge them together into the twin prince's greatsword, consuming both weapons in the process. It's like the game makes you reenact their bond mechanically. 2 blades, 1 result, no going back. And the fused sword skill is where FromSoft really shows off. The weapon art is Sacred Light and Flame, and it's basically a switchable expression of the prince. One input triggers Sacred Lothric Light, the holy, ritual chosen heir side. The other triggers Flame of Lorien, the fire, brute force, older brother side. So the sword doesn't just reference the twins, it behaves like them. 1 body, 2 powers, 1 fate. You're literally holding their relationship in your hands. Lothric's Sacred Light and Lorien's Flame sharing the same blade, the same moveset, the same identity. Arena of Karim is one of the quietest tragedies in Dark Souls 3, because her entire future is shaped by what kind of faith you place in her hands. When you rescue her from the undead settlement, she is a blind cleric in training. She doesn't seek power, she doesn't question doctrine, she simply listens. From that moment on, her path is set by the miracles you choose to teach her. If you guide her toward light-aligned faith, something rare happens in this world. By giving her only traditional miracle tomes tied to established gods, her role slowly changes. She fulfills her purpose as a gentle miracle teacher, and once that purpose is complete, she leaves her original place and moves to the bottom of the Firelink Shrine Tower. There, she becomes a Firekeeper. She doesn't wear the traditional robes, and she no longer teaches miracles. Her presence is quieter, more restrained. She speaks only a little. Firekeepers aren't scholars or preachers. They are vessels. Their role is to tend to the flame, to exist as conduits rather than voices. Arena's blandness, her lack of ambition, and her simple devotion make her uniquely suited to this role. By guiding her toward light, you allow her to avoid the fate that consumes so many others. She doesn't descend into obsession. and she doesn't become another mouthpiece for the deep. Instead, she becomes still, present, and purposeful, a second quiet anchor in Firelink Shrine. Pontiff Sullivan corrupted the Outrider Knights by giving them bewitched eye rings, the Pontiff's left and right eye. These rings drive knights into endless lethal combat and eventually transform them into beast-like, mindless guards. That isn't interpretation, it's straight out of the item descriptions. Now, here's why this really matters. Those eyes aren't metaphors and aren't cosmetic. They're rings with black, staring orbs, and the text is very specific about what they do. Knights who accept them are lured into battles of death, rewarded for aggression, and slowly lose themselves in the process. Violence stops being a duty and becomes a compulsion. That is why the Outrider Knights don't just look warm, they behave warm. Their movements are feral, their posture hunched, their attacks relentless. Vord is the clearest example because the game leaves a paper trail. His soul can be transposed directly into Pontiff's left eye. That's the game straight up telling you this ring is what defined him. Vord isn't a monster that happened to serve Sullivan. He's the end result of Sullivan's method, working exactly as intended. The Dancer of the Boreal Valley fits the same system. Her enchanted swords are explicitly gifts from Pontiff Sullivan, confirming she belonged to him. While the game doesn't specify which eye ring she wore, the Outrider Knight lore explains why she moves and looks the way she does. Her inhuman grace, her detached posture, that unsettling rhythm. That's a knight whose identity has been hollowed out by the Pontiff's influence. And then there is Sullivan himself. He literally wears eye rings around his neck. Item descriptions even note that he gives these rings to knights sent to foreign lands. That line is doing a lot of work. It means the rings are a control mechanism, a way to ensure loyalty at a distance. If a knight is deployed far from Irithyll, the eyes make sure they can never defect, hesitate, or return as anything other than a guard. So when you fight Vort at the High Wall or the Dancer in Lothric, you're seeing the aftermath of Pontiff Sullivan's system. The Dancer of the Boreal Valley's arena is permanently flammable, not just during the boss fight, but always. The floor is built from wax-coated wood and fabric, and is tagged as a fire-reactive material. During the fight, the Dancer's attacks ignited. Flames spread across the room, and the lighting shifts dramatically. Most players assume this is a scripted phase effect tied to the boss, but it isn't. If you come back later with a torch or toss a firebomb or swing a fire-infused weapon, the floor still ignites, the flames still spread. The same burn pattern still plays out, even after the Dancer is long dead. What's happening under the hood is simple but deliberate. The arena uses material-based interaction flags. Fire damage applies a burn state to the floor, and that state propagates outward over time. The Dancer just forces you to notice it by lighting huge sections at once and cranking the intensity during later phases. The system itself never turns off, and that choice lines up perfectly with who the Dancer is. She is an Outrider Knight, corrupted by Pontiff Sullivan, wielding enchanted fire and dark-infused blades. Her movement is slow, circular, almost ritualistic. The arena is designed to swallow depth perception, shadows everywhere, wide open space, very few hard visual anchors. Fire becomes how you read the room. As the floor burns, silhouettes sharpen. Distance becomes clearer. The fight slowly reveals itself through flame and smoke. When you light the area yourself outside the fight, you're recreating the same visual language without the boss, proving the space was built around fire first, combat second. Most players never notice this because there's no reward for it. You're not meant to discover it. You're meant to feel it once during the fight and assume it was just a spectacle. But it isn't. Almost no other boss arena in Dark Souls 3 behaves this way. The untended Firelink Shrine is directly connected to Firelink Shrine. Dark Souls 3 treats them as the same physical space, and here is the key giveaway. If you die in the untended graves, your bloodstain doesn't stay there. Your souls appear in the exact corresponding spot in Firelink Shrine. Same stairs, same thrones, same edges, and it works the other way around, too. This isn't a visual trick or a reused layout shortcut. The game engine is tracking both locations on the same coordinate grid, just with different environmental states layered on top. Almost nowhere else in Dark Souls 3 does that. Most areas keep death, souls, and recovery fully contained to their own map. Firelink and Untended Graves don't. That tells you immediately this isn't a dream world, a painted world, or a clean parallel dimension. It's one place, remembered differently. Mechanically, this matters because souls in Dark Souls aren't just currency. They represent memory, identity, persistence. If your souls can cross between these two zones, the game is saying that what happened in one still happened in the other. The Shrine Handmaid quietly confirms this. If you meet her in the Untended Graves first, she recognizes you later in Firelink Shrine. Memory carries over. Awareness carries over. Only the state of the world changes. So what is Untended Grave? Everything about it points to a Firelink where the flame has already failed, or was never properly sustained. The bonfire is cold, the Firekeeper is gone, the air is still and dead, and most tellingly, Champion Gundyr stands uncorrected. He's faster, stronger, disciplined, no pus of man, no degradation. Compare that to Iudex Gundyr, whose body has already been overtaken by corruption and repurposed into a test for Ashen One. This isn't about time travel in the usual sense. It's about state. Champion Gundyr represents Firelink before decay set in, not earlier on a timeline, but closer to its intended function. That's why Untended Graves feels empty rather than ancient. It's what Firelink becomes when the ritual it anchors no longer works. And that's the final implication. Here is a detail about Dragon Slayer armor that most players never even think to test. You can parry it, at least part of it. The boss is partially parryable, and the rules are very, very specific. If Dragon Slayer armor swings its axe one-handed, those horizontal or diagonal attacks can be parried with normal tools, bucklers, small shields, cestus, a parrying dagger. All of them work. Everything else, forget it. Two-handed axe attacks can't be parried. Shield bashes can't be parried. Lightning AoE, shockwaves, and butterfly projectiles are completely unparryable. That limitation is consistent every time. The reason almost nobody discovers this is simple. The boss doesn't look parryable. It's enormous, hollow, animated by pilgrim butterflies, and visually closer to a walking siege engine than a knight. Souls games usually teach you big equals unparryable, and Dragon Slayer armor breaks that rule quietly. Even if you do try, the parry window is brutal. The axe swings are slow, delayed, and heavy, with a tighter timing window than humanoid enemies. Miss it and you eat a massive punish. Most players try once, get flattened, and never attempt it again. Phase 2 makes it even less appealing. Once the butterflies fully activate, lightning starts filling the arena, interrupting parry attempts and pushing the fight toward positioning and survival instead of dueling. But when you land it, the armor staggers, you get that beautiful repose, and the damage is real, just not fight ending. It doesn't collapse like a human enemy. The stagger is short, and you have to commit immediately. It feels less like humiliating the boss, and more like briefly disrupting something that shouldn't be interruptible at all. One of the earliest something is off moments in Dark Souls 3 happens on the bridge to Irithyll. That thing on the bridge isn't random. It's a Sullivan's Beast, a creature tied directly to Pontiff Sullivan and the religion built around Aldrich. These beasts only show up in Irithyll and Anor Londo, places ruled by Sullivan and warped by Aldrich's faith. They're holy beasts twisted by the deep, not wildlife, and the game gives you a really strange way to prove that. If you stagger the beast, land a riposte, and don't kill it, something unexpected happens. It collapses, thrashes for a moment, and then curls inward. It stops attacking, lowers itself, and looks like it's praying. The beast becomes passive for a short window, completely non-hostile, until you attack it again. That moment is the game quietly telling you this creature isn't just feral muscle. It still understands ritual, submission, and worship. And then there's what happens when you don't kill it. If you spare the beast on the bridge, you later encounter a Sullivan's Beast again down in the water-filled area near Irithyll Dungeon. The game never outright says it is the same one, but the clues line up perfectly. The bridge beast retreats into the water. The later beast emerges from that same water system, and if you kill the beast bridge early, the later encounter never happens. And that continuity matters. These beasts don't blindly guard territory. They test, withdraw when beaten, and return when conditions favor them. That behavior mirrors Pontiff Sullivan himself, indirect, patient, and manipulative, rather than brute force aggressive. The beast tests you physically. Pontiff tests you mechanically and mentally. Both reveal something extra only when you show control instead of desperation. When you dominate without frenzy. Deep beneath the catacombs of Karthus, at the far end of Smoldering Lake, you run into the old Demon King, and this fight tells its story almost entirely through mechanic. This isn't a demon lord at the height of power. This is one of the last true demons, a remnant of the Chaos Flame itself. Demonkind is already dying by the time Dark Souls 3 takes place, and the old Demon King is basically a walking ember that refused to go out. You feel that most clearly at the very end of the fight. When the old Demon King drops to roughly 5 to 10% health, something unusual happens. Instead of getting faster or more aggressive like most bosses in the game, he does the opposite. He stops fighting smart. He gathers everything he has left and unleashes a single, massive, fiery explosion. Huge radius, heavy damage. If you're careless, it will absolutely end the run. And then, he is spent. After that blast, his flames visibly die down. Entire chunks of his fire-based moveset disappear. His attacks slow. His swings lose coordination. He starts collapsing, kneeling, struggling to stand. Sometimes he can barely do more than weak slams or exhausted swipe. This isn't RNG or player imagination. It's a hardcore phase transition, and it's incredibly rare in Dark Souls 3. Most bosses at low health will speed up or unlock new moves, or go into full desperation mode. The old Demon King burns himself out. That design only makes sense when you understand what he is. Demons in Dark Souls don't regenerate flame the way Lords of Cinder do. When they expend it, it is gone. Fire is their life source, not a resource they can recover. So that massive explosion isn't a charge up or a transformation. It's him emptying himself completely in one final attempt to end the fight immediately. If it worked, he wins. If it doesn't, there's nothing left. One of the most obscure details in Dark Souls 3 only appears if you defeat Pontiff Sullivan in a very specific way. If the final blow that kills him is a riposte, a successful parry followed by a critical, Pontiff doesn't die like a normal boss. Instead, he slumps forward, loses balance, lets his weapons fall, and dies quietly. That animation only plays under that condition. Kill him with normal attacks, spells, and bleed or chip damage, and you'll never see it. The standard death animation triggers instead. The requirement is strict. Parry, riposte, killing blow. Miss any part of that chain and the moment is gone. That's why most players never see it. Pontiff is fast, oppressive, and designed to overwhelm. His fight discourages parrying through sheer pressure. Even players who do parry him often finish the fight with regular damage, which means the animation never triggers. And that's exactly why it exists. Pontiff Sulyvahn isn't framed as a monster. He's framed as a duelist and a tyrant. 2 swords, 2 power sources, a moveset built around rhythm, intimidation, and control of tempo. He dominates the arena by never letting you breathe. When you kill him that way, the game acknowledges it. You broke his technique. Dark Souls 3 rarely rewards skill with extra animation, but when it does, it's deliberate. With Pontiff, the game quietly says, if you beat him at his own game, timing, precision, control, he dies like a fallen swordsman, not a raging god. Very reminiscent of Sir Along from Dark Souls. After you defeat Osiris, his arena feels like a full stop. Most players grab the bonfire, turn around, and never think about that place again. But the game remembers it, and it waits. Much later, when you reach Archdragon Peak, you can stumble into a Drakeblood Knight near the Dragonkin Mausoleum. Silver armor, lightning, and magic mixed together. A fighting style built around a dragon obsession. If you kill him, nothing happens on screen. No pop-up, no hints, no reward. Until you go back. If you return to Osiris's arena after killing that Drakeblood Knight, the space has changed. There's now a corpse laying there. Is the Drakeblood set? Miss the condition and the body never appears. Never revisit the arena and you'll never know it was possible. And the placement is doing a lot of quiet storytelling. Drakeblood Knights are dragon worshippers. They hunt dragons, drain their power, and chase transcendence through obsession. That's the entire point of their order. And Osiris, he walked that exact path, abandoning his crown, fixating on seed, twisting himself into something barely human in the hope of a draconic immortality. So the armor doesn't drop in Archdragon Peak. It doesn't appear on the knight's body. It ends up in Osiris's lair. This is where that obsession leads. Just armor left on a corpse, left behind in the den of someone who followed the same idea even further, and failed completely. One of the quietest callbacks in Dark Souls 3 hits if you ever wander back into Anor Londo and actually stop to look. Slumped over the anvil is the corpse of the giant blacksmith. Same spot, same posture, same fort. No item description explains it, no NPC comments on it. There's no dramatic framing, no music cue, no boss guarding the moment. He's just there, still at work, and that silence is doing all the storytelling. Back in Dark Souls 1, the giant blacksmith was defined by a few simple things. Loyalty to Anor Londo, quiet labor, and an almost stubborn sense of purpose. He never betrayed you, never went hostile, never left. While other characters spiraled, schemed, or hollowed out, he just kept smithing. So when Dark Souls 3 shows him dead at the anvil, it's not random set dressing. From Software has a visual language for death. Violent ends usually look violent. Bodies sprawled, environments damaged, signs of struggle everywhere. That isn't what this is. He's upright, undisturbed, positioned exactly where he's always stood. The implication is painfully simple. He didn't fall in battle. He didn't flee Aldrich. He didn't abandon the city. He stayed, and eventually, time caught up. In Farron Keep, tucked away in a damp cave near the perimeter bonfire, Dark Souls 3 quietly finishes a story it never retells out loud. You find 3 things sitting together, and none of them are random. A dead mushroom person, unmistakably shaped like Elizabeth, a corpse clutching the golden scroll, and a chest holding the antiquated set, the clothing once worn by Dusk of Ulasil. Elizabeth, back in Dark Souls 1, was a sanctuary guardian of Ulasil, gentle, ancient, and devoted to preserving sorcery rather than wielding it for power. She survives the fall of Ulasil and then disappears from history. Dark Souls 3 answers that silence visually. The mushroom here is dead, slumped, no longer guarding anything. Whatever her kind was, it did not endure the ages. Right beside her is the golden scroll, containing advanced sorceries rooted in Ulasil's tradition. Its location matters. This knowledge isn't enshrined in a court or preserved by a kingdom. It is hidden in a swamp, held by someone who died protecting it. Ulasil's magic survived not through institutions, but through individuals who carried it until they couldn't anymore. Then there's the antiquated set. Dusk herself is gone. What remains is fabric, memory without presence, identity reduced to leftover. And Farron Keep is the perfect place for all of this to end up. It's a poisoned ruin tied to noble causes that decayed into endless conflict. Ulasil followed the same path centuries earlier, flourishing sorcery, abyssal corruption, total collapse. Elizabeth's kind is gone. Dusk exists only as clothing. Their sorcery survives as a scroll clutched by a corpse in the mud. In Farron Keep, there's a nod to Artorias' companion Sif. There's a moment that hits long before any dialogue ever could. You come across the old Wolf of Farron, lying motionless before a massive gravestone. Not prowling, not threatening, just resting there, like it's been waiting for someone that never came. If that image feels familiar, it's because it's meant to. Back in Darkroot Garden, Sif guarded the grave of Knight Artorias the same way. A great wolf, a fallen knight, a silent vigil. Dark Souls 3 isn't borrowing wolf imagery here. It's deliberately recreating one of the most emotionally loaded scenes in the entire series. Farron Keep belongs to the Abyss Watchers, an order that openly models itself after Artorias. The armor echoes it. Their great swords mimic his fighting style. Their oath is the same. Hunt the abyss wherever it appears, no matter the cost. By the time you arrive, Artorias isn't remembered as a person anymore. He's a myth that shaped an entire culture. The old wolf sits at the center of that myth. The game never tells you the wolf is Sif. It doesn't need to. Artorias' legacy lasted so long that even the image of his guardian became sacred. The wolf isn't protecting a single grave anymore. It's protecting an idea. And the Covenant rewards make that crystal clear. By serving the watchdogs of Farron, you earn the Wolf Ring and the Wolf Knight's Great Shield, both artifacts directly tied to Artorias. Covenant rewards in Dark Souls are never arbitrary. They define lineage. By giving you Artorias' equipment, the game is telling you exactly where this oath came from. The gravestone itself is unmarked and oversized. Artorias' grave was monumental, even when his name was already fading in Dark Souls 1. By Dark Souls 3, names barely matter at all. Rules do. Everyone who understands the story already knows who that stone represents. And then there's the wolf's condition. Unlike Sif, who fought to the death to protect Artorias' resting place, the old wolf can barely move. It is wounded and fading, sustained only through Covenant offering. The duty still exists, but the strength to carry it out is almost gone. Down in the Demon Realms, there's a moment that feels very easy to miss. You find a corpse slumped on the ground, clutching the Quelana pyromancy tome that's already doing a lot of work. That tome doesn't represent generic pyromancy. It's tied specifically to Quelana of Isolith, one of the Daughters of Chaos, and the only one who rejected the Chaos Flame outright. She taught pyromancy as knowledge, not as faith. And in Dark Souls 3, that knowledge isn't on an altar or guarded by an enemy. It's dying with someone. Dark Souls 3 uses placement very deliberately. When an item like this is found on a body, it's the game saying, this person carried this knowledge to the end. They died with it. Right next to that corpse is the remains of a giant spider-like demon, unmistakably Chaosborn. The game never labels it, never confirms whether it's Quelaag, the White Lady, or simply another chaos spider from Izalith's final day. And that ambiguity matters. What is clear is that this is the last place chaos has left to go. Quilana was the daughter who walked away when Izalith fell. She left while her sisters clung to the flame and were twisted by it. Finding her here suggests she came back only at the very end to witness what remained. There's no sign of combat. That's how Dark Souls 3 treats the end of chaos. Just a dead teacher, a forgotten demon, and a tome left behind in the ash. By the time you arrive, pyromancy isn't spreading anymore. It's evolving. It's being archived. She leaves her scroll on the ground and lets the world move on without her. In Central Irithyll, the game does something subtle that a lot of players feel before they ever understand it. You start seeing those ghostly, half-transparent figures drifting through the street. They don't even seem to notice you unless you get close. They just move slowly. And if you played Dark Souls 1, that feeling should ring a bell, because this is the exact same emotional language the game used with the Black Knights in the kiln of the First Flame. Back then, the Black Knights weren't protecting anything anymore. They wandered. They didn't patrol routes or defend objectives. They felt like leftovers, warriors whose war had already ended. You encountered them not as a challenge, but as evidence that the world was already past saving. Irithyll's phantoms function the same way. They drift instead of patrol. They exist instead of defend. They feel detached from the living world. Mechanically, they can be fought and killed. Visually, they lack solidity. They look more like memories than soldiers. Whatever they once were, citizens, worshippers, servants of the gods, that identity is gone. What remains is a presence without purpose. And that's why the comparison matters. The Black Knights were burned by the First Flame and stripped of direction. They survived the end of an age, but not with meaning intact. Irithyll's phantoms are the same outcome reached from a different path. Aldrich has consumed the city's god. Point of Sullivan hollowed out its structure. The runes carved into the Titanite slab in Dark Souls 3 have actually been translated, at least as far as anyone outside from software realistically can. They aren't random scratches or decorative noise. They form a consistent, repeatable set of symbols that behave like a runic script, and one dedicated community deep dive treated them exactly that way, as something meant to be read, not just looked at. The slab texture includes a band of stylized characters that resemble ancient runes rather than letters. The key insight was realizing these weren't meant to be mapped one-to-one like an alphabet. Rune systems really don't work that way. Each symbol usually carries a concept as much as a sound. Things like growth, fire, hardship, wealth, ending. So instead of forcing a literal cipher, the translation approach matched each symbol to the closest historical rune shape, then used the shared symbolic meaning to build a coherent reading, more like a best fit myth. And the result is kind of wild. The text reads like a miniature creation saga. It begins with beings living among the giant trees, the archtrees. They seek the divine and receive gifts, abundance, growth, plenty. Then hardship arrives, cold and stillness. A spark is discovered, something that grows into a blazing force, like a sun. That force drives back the cold. A great conflict then follows. The conflict ends through fire. An age of wealth and power begins. And finally, a warning that the cold will return and the age will change once again. That is exactly the Dark Souls creation myth. Archtrees, discovery of the First Flame, war with the dragons, the age of fire, and the inevitable fading. That's why this translation stuck with people. Not because it's probably canonical. It isn't. But because it sounds like something Dark Souls would hide in plain sight. a half-remembered saga etched into the rarest reinforcement material in the game. And there's an extra layer of cleverness here. Titanite slabs are the final upgrade material. They represent completion, perfection, the end of a weapon's growth. So the idea that the slab itself carries a compressed history of the world's ages feels intentional, even if the exact wording is debatable. Though that debate too holds weight. Some symbols could mean sun or fire or light, depending on interpretation. Cold might literally mean ice, or it might be shorthand for darkness, the absence of flame. Different readings can shift the emphasis without breaking the overall story. From Software has never confirmed a correct translation. Multiple mappings can produce slightly different but still plausible readings. Even the people who worked on the translation stress that it is an informed best guess, not gospel. But in classic Souls fashion, certainty is not the point. The point is that the slab, the things blacksmiths treat as the ultimate material, quietly tells a story about cycles, fire, and ending, just through symbols carved into metal that almost no one stops to examine, which feels exactly right. If Dark Souls was going to hide its creation myth somewhere, it wouldn't put it in a book. Let's look at some overlooked mechanics that are barely talked about, and something that's barely talked about is ladder combat. Ladder combat in Dark Souls 3 looks like a vertical duel with punches and kicks. The rules are extremely simple and completely consistent. When you're on a ladder, the game strips almost everything away and reduces the interaction to stamina management. You get two actions, punch upward or kick downward. Both deal almost no health damage, but they chew through stamina fast. Whoever runs out of stamina first loses their grip and falls. No parries, no blocking, no rolling. That's it. The first time this really clicked for me was in Farron Keep. I was climbing up, low on Estus, thinking I was safe because the enemy above me only had a sliver of health left. He kicked me once, twice, my stamina broke, and I just slid off the ladder and died to fall damage. Full health wouldn't have mattered. I didn't lose because of HP, I lost because I ignored stamina. You can't mash, every punch or kick costs stamina, and if you get greedy, you're the one who falls. I've had moments in PvP where both of us were just hanging there, trading single hits, waiting for the other person to panic first. Whoever panics loses. It's weirdly quiet and focused compared to normal combat. Another one of Dark Souls 3's quiet cruelty checks is the leech mechanic, because the game never tells you what's happening, only that you're suddenly dying after the fight is over. When leeches latch onto you, they aren't a debuff in the usual sense. They're physical parasites attached to your character. You see them writhing on your body, but as long as they're attached, they keep building bleed non-stop. And the nasty part is how patient they are. I still remember this dirty little thing chipping away at my health slowly and wondering what it was that got me. Just punishment for not yet understanding the system. That's what makes leeches so lethal compared to normal bleed sources. Most bleed up stops when the enemy stops hitting you. But leeches don't care. Once they're on you, they're working on their own schedule. And that's why your torch matters so much. The torch isn't a weapon here. It's a utility item. The moment you equip it, leeches drop off instantly. The first time you figure this out feels like discovering a secret rule the game never explained. Suddenly those swamp sections stop being random death traps and start feeling manageable. You don't need resistance. You don't need to panic heal through bleed. You just need to remember to pull out a torch. After learning that simply equipping a torch removes leeches, Dark Souls 3 quietly teaches you the same lesson again with Frostbite. Frostbite is not an instant debuff. Like bleed, it fills an invisible buildup meter. Nothing happens until that meter reaches its threshold. When Frostbite procs, two things happen at once. First, it deals a burst of damage equal to roughly 11% of the target's HP, plus a flat damage bonus. This makes it effective even against high HP enemies. Second, it applies a debuff that reduces stamina regen and lowers damage absorption, making the target more vulnerable for a short time. Fire does not prevent frostbite buildup. Fire only removes the active frostbitten debuff after it has already been procced. If a frostbitten target takes any fire damage, whether from a torch, a fire weapon, or pyromancy, the debuff is cleared immediately. However, the game does not reset the underlying buildup tracking. This allows frostbite to proc again much sooner. This is why the frost-fire loop works. Build frost, trigger the proc, apply fire, the frostbite clears, and you build frost again. Let's look at all the status effects, and one thing common between all of them. There's a global rule the game almost never breaks. Status effects do not scale with your stats, your weapon damage, upgrades, or buffs. They scale off the target, not you. Your strength, dexterity, faith, weapon AR, and fusions, none of that changes how hard a status effect hits. The only thing you control is how fast the status procs, not how strong it is. Bleed. Bleed is pure burst damage. When it procs, it deals a fixed percentage of the target's maximum HP, plus a small flat damage bonus. That damage does not scale with your stats, doesn't increase with weapon upgrades, and never changes per proc. What buildup does is determines how often bleed triggers, nothing more. Frostbite. Frostbite follows the same rule. When Frostbite procs, it deals a fixed percentage of max HP plus flat damage. It applies a stamina regen penalty and lowers damage absorption. None of that scales with your character. Fire damage removes frostbitten debuff, does not reduce future frost damage, and does not reset the internal buildup tracking. This is why frost can be looped so efficiently. Poison is damage over time, but the rule still holds. Damage per tick is fixed. Duration is fixed. Tick damage does not scale with stat. Poison feels stronger on high HP enemies because they live long enough to take the full duration, not because the poison itself hits harder. Buildup only affects how fast poison starts. Toxic is just a harsher version of poison. Higher damage per tick, shorter duration. Same non-scaling rules. So no stat scaling, no weapon scaling, only activation speed changes. Curse is the extreme endpoint of this design. No damage values, no scaling, and on proc, you die. The only variable is how fast that meter fills. Once you understand that status effects in Dark Souls 3 are about thresholds and uptime rather than scaling, Simple Infusion clicks immediately. It follows the same design rule. Small numbers that matter because they persist, not because they scale. On the surface, Simple Infusion adds just intelligence scaling and lowers physical damage, which already tells you it's not meant for raw DPS. That part is obvious on the stat screen. The real value is hidden. Any Simple Infused weapon or shield restores FP passively while it's equipped. The regeneration rate is fixed at roughly 1 FP every 4 seconds. It doesn't scale with intelligence, doesn't require attacking, and keeps working as long as the item stays equipped. It also stacks with other FP regeneration sources. That sounds insignificant until you remember how DS3 actually checks FP. Weapon skills and buffs don't care about your total FP bar, only whether you meet the minimum cost at the moment of activation. 0 FP locks the skill. 1 FP or more unlocks it. Because of that, even extremely slow regeneration becomes functionally powerful over time. A good example is the Sunlight Straightsword. Its weapon art requires FP to activate the buff. If you're completely empty, you can't use it. With a Simple Infused offhand item equipped, FP will slowly tick back up. The moment it reaches the minimum threshold, the game allows the buff again. You don't need Ashen Estus or to invest in casting stats, and you don't need to manage a full FP bar. It's slow, but it's effectively infinite. This is why simple infusion works best on offhand shields or backup weapons you never swing. You keep full damage on your main weapon while gaining constant FP regeneration in the background. Dark Souls 3 has many large models, and one, the largest model in the entire game, can be found in Archdragon Peak. Embedded directly into the mountain is the corpse of an ancient dragon, either long dead or petrified beyond distinction. It's a background entity, but it's fully modeled, has real geometry and collision, and exists as a continuous physical object in the world, rather than a skybox trick or distant silhouette. This dragon is not the ancient wyvern boss. It's a completely separate entity. You can't target it, damage it, or interact with it in any way. It simply exists, wrapped around the peak itself, partially obscured by terrain and clouds, extending far beyond what the camera ever lets you fully see. In terms of raw scale, nothing else in Dark Souls 3 comes close. It is larger than the ancient wyvern, larger than Dark Eater Midir, larger than Yhorm the giant, and larger than any boss arena-sized enemy in the game. Individual scales are roughly the size of player characters. Its body coils around the mountain and continues out of view, meaning you never actually see its full form at once. This matters because it's not just big scenery. In engine terms, it's a real entity. Have you ever wondered what the max level you can reach in Dark Souls 3 is? The answer is level 802. It's the absolute hard limit baked into the game's stat system. Dark Souls 3 has 9 core attributes, and each one hard caps at 99. If you max out every single stat, vigor, attunement, endurance, vitality, strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, and luck, you end up with 9 stats times 99 levels for a total of 802. That is it. You physically cannot go higher because there's nowhere left to put levels. What makes this interesting is how unrealistic it is to reach naturally. The soul cost per level scales aggressively, and the jump from the high 300s onward becomes absurd. By the time you're pushing toward max level, a single level costs tens of millions of souls. Reaching 802 in a legitimate playthrough would require an almost comical amount of farming, or an extreme number of New Game Plus cycles. It also doesn't turn your character into an untouchable god the way people expect. Enemies still hit hard, bosses still punish mistakes, and PvE scaling keeps the game dangerous. What max level really gives you is total flexibility. Every weapon, every spell, every build, all at once. There are 15 Titanite slabs available per new game cycle in Dark Souls 3, and that number is fixed unless you move into New Game Plus. That means in a single playthrough, you can fully upgrade 15 weapons to plus 10 or plus 5 to special weapons. No farming, no enemy drops, no infinite purchase loot. Slabs are strictly limited. What makes this important is how late-game upgrades work in DS3. A Titanite slab is the final upgrade material, and once you use it, it's gone for that cycle. The game spreads those slabs across late-game areas, optional zones, NPC quest lines, covenant rewards, and one-time pickup, which means two things happen naturally. Players who explore thoroughly and finish quests are rewarded with more fully upgraded weapons, and players who rush or miss content are forced to specialize. This is intentional design. Dark Souls 3 doesn't want you maxing everything in one run. It wants you to choose, experiment, and then live with those choices, or carry them into New Game Plus. It also ties back to the earlier max level discussion. Even if you hit SL 802 and have every stat cap, you're still constrained by upgrade materials. PvP invasions in Dark Souls 3 changed one of the most important rules about how invasions actually work. In DS3, the covenant you have equipped at the moment you land a successful PvP kill is what determines the reward you get. That means red eye orbs, cracked red eye orbs, summon signs, or auto summons are just delivery methods. They don't decide anything. The Covenant does. If you're wearing Warriors of Sunlight when you kill a host or eligible Phantom, you get a Sunlight medal, even if you invaded as a red Phantom and never cooperated at all. The game only checks the Covenant. If you are a Mound Maker, a kill that satisfies their conditions gives you a Vertebrae Shackle, whether you invaded, were summoned, or turned on the host mid-fight. Chaos is the point. If you're wearing Rosaria's Fingers, a successful invasion gives a pale tongue. That's why most standard red invasions default to pale tongues. Rosaria's is the fallback PvP covenant if nothing else is equipped. Area-based PvP covenants work the same way, just with auto-summons instead of orbs. Aldrich Faithful award human dregs. Watchdogs of Farron award wolf's blood swordgrass. Again, the Covenant decides the payout, not the method. Even phantom colors tie into this system. The color you see isn't cosmetic flair, it's information. Purple means Mound Maker and unpredictable rules. Gold means sunlight and cooperative incentives. Deep red or blue tinted red signals, territory-based enforcer. This is why DS3 PvP feels more readable than earlier Souls games. One of the little quirks people don't realize at first is that NPC invaders don't actually behave like players at all. Even though they look exactly like them, they feel like PvP. They show up like PvP. But under the hood, they are something very different. An invading NPC in Dark Souls 3 is essentially a hostile phantom driven entirely by AI, not by player rules. They are scripted enemies, designed to simulate the pressure of an invasion without introducing the unpredictability of a real person. That's why the game can place them at specific moments, tie them to areas, and even use them for storytelling. Because they're AI, they obey PvE logic. They have threat tables, aggro priorities, pathing routines, and reaction states. That's why things like alluring skulls work on many of them. When you throw a skull, the game isn't asking, is this a phantom? It's asking, is this an enemy that can be distracted? And for NPC invaders, the answer is often yes. You'll see it happen clearly. The invader pauses, turns, and walks toward the skull, and momentarily forgets about you. It's the same behavior you'd get from a hollow or a knight. And that illusion breaks though, the moment you remember this isn't a real person invading your world. It's a hostile echo inserted by the game. NPC invaders also don't think tactically. They don't bait rolls, they don't adapt builds, and they don't read your habits. They pressure forward, swing aggressively, and reset once their AI loop finishes. That's why tools like spacing, line of sight breaks, and aggro manipulation work so well on them. Lore-wise, this actually kind of fits. NPC invaders are usually framed as lost warriors, oathbound phantoms, mad spirits, or remnants of failed champions. They aren't fully present people crossing worlds. They're echoes repeating the same violence over and over. That's why they feel relentless but shallow, aggressive but predictable. Think about characters like Holy Knight Hodrick, Creighton, or the many nameless invaders scattered across Lothric. They're here because they can't stop fighting. The game represents that obsession mechanically by stripping them of agency and turning them into AI. A lot of enemies in the game have hidden vulnerable states. You can trigger them by hammering a head hitbox, focusing a weak point, or simply exhausting whatever internal poise or posture value that enemy has. This applies to enemies that don't look like they should stagger at all. Huge beasts, armored monsters, things that feel immovable until suddenly they're not. When it happens, you'll see it immediately. The enemy stumbles, slumps, kneels, or freezes in place for a moment. Sometimes they fall outright. Sometimes they just sit there, breathing heavily, wide open. That doesn't always mean you'll get a riposte prompt. Instead, what the game often gives you is something subtler, a damage window. During that window, your regular attacks suddenly hit way harder. Light attacks chunk, spells bite deeper, projectiles feel like they land with more weight. If you ever thought, why did that normal R1 just do way more damage than it should? That's exactly what you were seeing. Dark Souls 3 confirms this without UI by using sound. There's a very specific, sharper hit sound that plays when you land bonus damage. You'll hear it when an enemy is in one of those vulnerable states, when you land a counter hit while they're mid-swing, or you connect during certain stagger frames. It's the same audio cue across all of these situations. The game is telling you, yes, that counted. And that's why the sound shows up even when you're not backstabbing or riposting. The system underneath doesn't care about animations. It cares about timing and state. Riposts are just one expression of that system, not the whole thing. Let's take a moment and talk about weapon art, because I know a lot of us barely used them on a first playthrough. You can beat all of Dark Souls 3 without ever touching L2, so it's easy to think they're optional fluff. But the game actually built them to be way more flexible than most people realize. Having 0 FP does not automatically lock you out of weapon art. Weapon arts in DS3 fall into two mechanical behavior. Some weapon arts hard require FP. If you don't meet the minimum cost, nothing happens. You press the input, your character does nothing, and that's it. These are usually the big, flashy ones. Buffs, projectiles, transformations, or anything that behaves like a spell. If the FP isn't there, the skill simply won't fire. But a large number of melee-focused weapon arts still activate at 0 FP. They're just weaker. When you use one of these weapon arts without enough FP, the game doesn't cancel the move, the animation still plays, the swing still comes out, the dash still happens. What changes is how effective it is. At low or 0 FP, damage multipliers are reduced, bonus effects can disappear entirely, hyper armor or poise can be weaker, and secondary properties may not apply. You're basically getting a fallback version of the skill instead of the full-powered one. This is why some stance attacks still hit but feel underwhelming, or why certain gap closers still move you forward but don't hit nearly as hard as you expected. FP in Dark Souls 3 isn't a simple on or off switch, it's a quality slider. Full FP gives you the complete version of a weapon art. Low or no FP gives you a stripped down version that is still usable in a pit. Getting more into combat, let's take a look at jumping attacks, because this is one of those mechanics a lot of players use instinctively without realizing how much is actually going on under the hood. First off, jump attacks are very easy to perform, but the game is strict about the input. The most common method is pushing the stick forward and pressing heavy attack. If your control scheme allows it, forward plus light attack can also trigger the same move. As long as the jump animation comes out, the game internally flags it as a jump attack, no matter what weapon you're holding. That classification matters, because jump attacks have their own damage rules. They use higher motion values than standard light attacks, often landing in the same damage range as hitting a standing heavy attack, sometimes even a bit higher. There's no RNG here and no hidden stat scaling. The extra damage comes purely from the move itself applying a stronger multiplier to your weapon's normal AR. This is why jump attacks feel so chunky, even on simple builds. You're just using a move that hits harder by design. Where things really get spicy is counter damage. If your jump attack connects while the enemy is in the middle of an attack animation, the game applies a counter hit multiplier. You'll hear that sharp, distinct sound cue when it happens. Thrust-style weapons benefit especially from this, which is why jump attacks can sometimes delete chunks of HP way faster than you expect. It's not just damage either. Jump attacks also deal high poise damage. They're great at staggering enemies, interrupting attacks, and knocking smaller foes off balance. That makes them perfect for opening engagements or punishing slow, telegraphed enemies who think they're safe mid-swing. If you're a casual player, you must think that poise is the same across Dark Souls 1 to Dark Souls 3, but it's not. Let's talk about poise in Dark Souls 3, because this is one of the most misunderstood mechanics in the entire game. And it's a big reason people feel like armor does nothing. In Dark Souls 3, poise is not passive. Some players might not even know what it fully does. It's another hidden mechanic that Dark Souls has, which adds so much soul to the whole game, so let me explain. Unlike Dark Souls 1, you cannot just stack heavy armor and expect to tank hits while standing still. Poise only matters while you're actively attacking with certain moves. If you're idle, walking, or just blocking, your poise value might as well not exist. Poise in DS3 is hyper armor based. That means poise only activates during specific attack animations. Usually heavy attacks, charged attacks, jump attacks, weapon arcs, and certain two-handed swing. When one of these moves starts, the game temporarily turns your poise on. During that window, incoming hits are checked against your poise value to see if your attack continues or gets interrupted. If you're not in one of those animations, you have effectively 0 poise, no matter what you're wearing. Armor still matters, but only as fuel. Your armor determines how much poise you have available when hyper armor activates. Heavy armor gives you a larger poise pool, which means you can absorb more incoming poise damage before being staggered mid-swing. Light armor gives you very little room for error. No attack, no poise. That's why players in heavy armor still get staggered by basic enemies if they're just standing there, and why the same player can suddenly power through hits during a greatsword swing. Poise damage is also a thing. Every enemy attack deals poise damage, just like it deals HP damage. If the poise damage you take during your hyper armor window exceeds your available poise, your attack gets interrupted. Smaller weapons deal low poise damage. Big weapons, explosions, and heavy enemy attacks deal a lot. That's why trading with a hollow feels easy, but trading with a knight or a boss often doesn't work unless you're using very heavy weapons with strong hyper armor. Weapon class matters a lot. Ultra great swords, great axes, great hammers, and some halberds have very strong hyper armor. Straight swords, katanas, and light weapons have little to none. You can wear full Havel and still get interrupted if your weapon doesn't support hyper armor in its moveset. DS3 ties poise more to commitment than defense. Poise is about winning trades, not ignoring danger. Some weapons have their own bonuses. For example, daggers have quickstep, and it completely changes how they're meant to be played. Quickstep is a weapon art, not a normal dodge. When you have a dagger equipped, it replaces rolling with a short, fast, evasive movement that is built for close-range combat rather than disengaging. The first thing that surprises people is that Quickstep uses FP, not stamina. You can still use it at 0 FP, but it becomes noticeably worse. Shorter distance, fewer iframes, and longer recovery. FP doesn't just unlock Quickstep, it directly controls how good it is. Mechanically, Quickstep gives you real invincibility frames, but they behave differently from a roll. The iframes start earlier, which makes it excellent against sudden or delayed attacks, but they end sooner. You're invulnerable fast, but briefly. That's why it shines at point-blank range, where rolling would be too slow or too wide. Distance is another key difference. Quickstep covers much less ground than a roll, and that is intentional. It keeps you close to the enemy instead of pulling you away. You can step forward, backward, or sideways, letting you micro-adjust your position instead of resetting the fight. Stamina barely matters here. Quickstep costs very little stamina, so you can attack, quickstep, then attack again without collapsing your bar. As long as you manage your FP, daggers can stay aggressive almost indefinitely. This is why dagger play feels oppressive up close when used correctly. The animation is also part of what makes it strong. Quickstep has faster startup and shorter recovery than a roll. meaning you can chain steps together or transition back into attacks almost immediately. When someone knows the timing, it's extremely hard to punish. In PvE, Quick Step lets you stay inside enemy hitboxes, especially against large or slow bosses. Many enemies simply don't track it well, which makes ankle range fighting much safer than rolling away. In PvP, it is strong, but not unbeatable. Quick Step can dodge roll catches and delayed attacks, and its variable timing makes parrying difficult, but it's weak for disengaging, predictable for side spamming, and can be punished. And once FP runs dry, its effectiveness drops fast. Just like Quick Step gives daggers a built-in movement advantage, some weapons come with their own unique bonuses, and the Sunlight Straightsword is one of the best examples. This weapon has a built-in self-buff weapon art, and the important part is how little FP you actually need to use it. The Sunlight Straightsword's weapon art applies a temporary buff that increases your damage and boosts nearby allies. Mechanically, the game only checks whether you meet the minimum FP cost at the moment you activate it. It doesn't care how full your FP bar is. So even if you're almost empty, just a sliver of focus, the buff still goes through at full strength. This ties directly into how weapon arts work in Dark Souls 3. Buff-type weapon arts fall into the category that require FP to activate. But once that requirement is met, there's no weaker version of the Sunlight Straightsword buff. You either activate it, or you don't. That's why this weapon pairs so well with things that passively give you FP regeneration. If you're running a simple infused offhand item, that slow trickle of FP is enough to eventually let you reapply the buff again, without touching Ashen Aesthetics. In practice, this means the Sunlight Straightsword can function almost like a permanent aura over a long fight. You wait, get just enough FP, pop the buff, and go back to fighting. And building on that, there's another combat option a lot of players underuse for the same reason. They're never really told just how strong it is. You can perform a charged attack simply by holding the heavy attack button instead of tapping it. When you hold R2 or right trigger, your character winds up instead of swinging immediately. Release the button, and you get a charged heavy attack. Mechanically, this does a few important things. The attack has a higher damage multiplier than a normal heavy. It deals much higher poise damage, making staggers more likely. It's far more effective at breaking enemy actions or forcing knockdowns, and against some enemies, contributes heavily to hidden stagger or critical state. This isn't just a slower heavy, it's a different move with its own internal values. The trade-off is commitment. Charged heavies have longer startup, clear tells, and more recovery if you miss. But if they land, the payoff is huge, especially against enemies that rely on poise or pressure rather than speed. Another small detail Dark Souls 3 uses to quietly guide you is item glow, and once you notice it, you can't unsee it. The brightness of an item's glow isn't random. The game uses different glow intensities to communicate importance at a glance. Items with a large, bright glow are almost always things the game really doesn't want you to miss. These include things like Estus shards, undead bone shards, rings, weapons, armor pieces, spell tomes, key items, and other progression-defining rewards. Even in dark areas or at long distances, these items punch through visually. Or on the other hand, items with a small, dim glow are usually common or repeatable things: consumables, soul items, ammunition, crafting materials, resin, moss, throwable. They're still visible when you're close, but they don't dominate the scene. That keeps the environment readable and stops every hallway from turning into a glitter bomb. What's important is what this glow doesn't mean. It doesn't tell you how strong an item is. It doesn't mean it's rare. It doesn't mean it's good for your build or hint at hidden effect. It's purely about design importance, whether the item is unique, non-repeatable, or central to player progression. Another mechanic missed by almost everyone is how grab resistance works across different enemies, and how inconsistent it is on purpose. After the Stray Demon teaches you that some grabs can be escaped, the game quietly does the opposite everywhere else. Most grab attacks in Dark Souls 3 are hard commit executions. Once the hitbox connects, the outcome is already decided. No mashing, no timing, no counterplay. The damage isn't calculated at the end of the animation. It's effectively locked in at the start. That's why mimics, boreal beasts, and many humanoid enemies feel so final when they catch you. The game is telling you you already failed earlier. Grabs in Dark Souls 3 are not one system. They're 3 systems wearing the same animation language. Some grabs are positional punishments, you stood in the wrong place. Some are stamina or greed checks. And a tiny handful are legacy grapple states, like the Stray Demon, where the game still listens to player input. Because the animations look so similar, players assume the rules are universal, but they're not. That's why mashing works once. It feels like it should work again, and then never does. Dark Souls 3 steadily strips interaction away as enemy importance rises. Early, clumsy creatures still let you struggle. Late-game enemies don't. By the time you reach bosses that grab you, the design philosophy has shifted entirely. Another massively overlooked mechanic in the game is the messaging system, and it's way deeper than most people ever realize. Dark Souls 2 quietly removed the orange soapstone entirely. There's no item to equip, no unlock, no restriction. Messaging is just always on. If you're online and standing in a valid spot, you can leave a message straight from the menu. That alone is a huge shift from earlier Souls games, but most players barely register it because it feels so natural now. What almost everyone misses is how flexible the system actually is. On the surface, messages look rigid and limited. Preset phrases, simple structure, same jokes, over and over. But if you press the confirm button while composing, the system opens up. You can extend sentences, change the verb tense, add modifiers, and even attach gestures. Suddenly the same phrase can sound like advice, sarcasm, a warning, or pure trolling, depending on how it's constructed. Gestures being embedded is another thing people forget exists. When someone reads your message, your character can physically act it out. A warning paired with a point forward, a lie paired with a bow, a joke paired with collect. It's subtle, but it's part of why Souls messages feel more alive than simple text on the ground. And then there's the part that really matters mechanically. Every single appraisal heals you. It doesn't matter if the rating is positive or negative, praise or scorn, both trigger the same effect. You get a small, instant HP restore scaled to your max health, wherever you are. Mid-fight, mid-boss, while running, there's no cooldown, no warning, no distinction between good and bad messages. That means even a deliberately misleading message can save your life. You could be fighting for your life, down to a sliver of health, and somewhere in another world, a player reads your message and rates it poorly, and you live because of it. That's not an accident. Dark Souls 3 turns communication into a passive survival system, one that operates completely outside your control. The wild part is how invisible this all is. The game never tells you messages heal you, it never highlights extensions, never pushes gestures. But once you know, the messaging system stops being flavor tech, pun intended, and starts being part of the meta, something that quietly links strangers together in real time, whether they mean to help you or not. It's extremely fun and incentivizes messaging and communicating in a game where communication is limited to phrases and gestures. A lot of people miss that NPC phantoms don't all work the same way, and simply summoning them is often not enough. In Dark Souls 3, some NPCs only reward you if very specific outcomes happen, and those outcomes can permanently change the world or unlock things you never get otherwise. A perfect example is Swamp Cuculus. If you summon Swamp Cuculus for the old demon fight, the game quietly starts tracking something most players never notice: whether she survives. If Cuculus lives to the old demon king, the game updates the world state afterward. When you return to the undead settlement and check Cornyx's cage, there is now a corpse inside. On it is Cornyx's pyromancer set and the spotted whip. If Cuculus dies, even if you win the fight, you get nothing. No fallback reward or no second chance. Items never appear. That is rare in Dark Souls 3. Very few NPCs can alter the world purely by surviving a boss fight, which is why this reward is so easy to miss. Gestures work the same way. They're not handed out for participation, they're handed out for specific interaction. Some gestures require success, others require failure. Some even require you to die. Take Night Slayer Syrric. You don't get his gesture by beating him. You get my thanks only if Syrric kills you during his invasion. Winning locks you out. Losing is the requirement. Then there's Londor Pale Shade. Successfully summoning them and completing the related events grants Dual Bow. No summon, no gesture. Blackhand Goddard works the same way. Summon him for the correct boss fight and you earn By My Sword. Miss the summon window and the gesture is gone for that playthrough. Yellowfinger Heisel follows this pattern too. Complete the correct summon or invasion interaction and you receive proper bow. Fight her the wrong way or at the wrong time, and you'll never see it. Something a little useful for everyone are hard caps and soft caps, because Dark Souls 3 never explains them, but they quietly shape every build whether you realize it or not. Every stat in Dark Souls has a hard cap of 99. That is the absolute ceiling. You physically cannot put another point into a stat once it hits 99, no matter how many souls you have. That part is simple. What actually matters for most players, though, are soft caps. A soft cap is the point where a stat starts giving diminishing returns. You still gain benefits after a soft cap, but each point is worth less than the one before it. The game never tells you when this happens. You just feel it when leveling suddenly stops feeling impactful. For Vigor, HP gains are strong early on, but around the mid-40s, the increase per level dropped hard. You are still getting more health, just not nearly as much per point as before. Attunement gives you spell slots first, then FP. You gain slots up to roughly the low 30s, after which leveling mainly adds FP. Past the high 30s to low 40s, FP gains themselves start to shrink. Endurance is one of the clearest examples. Stamina climbs quick early, but around 40 endurance, you're essentially at peak stamina. Levels after that give very little, even though defenses continue to rise slightly. The key thing to understand is this. Past a soft cap, you're paying more levels for less return, which is why optimized builds spread points instead of maxing one stat blindly. Let's talk about luck, because this is easily the most overlooked stat in Dark Souls 3, and I'd bet most players never touched it at all. Luck isn't a damage stat in the traditional sense, which is exactly why people ignore it. It doesn't suddenly make your weapon hit harder, it doesn't unlock flashy scaling curves, and it doesn't save you in a bad fight. What it does instead is quietly change how often things happen. The first and most straightforward, luck increases item discovery. This means enemies drop items more often. Nothing rarer, nothing higher quality, just more consistent drop. It doesn't affect souls, bosses, or guaranteed loot. But if you've ever farmed Covenant items, weapons, or armor sets, luck is doing real work there. This effect scales cleanly and predictably, and while there's no hard cutoff, its usefulness starts flattening out around the 40 range. Where luck gets misunderstood is status effect. Luck does not add bleed or poison to weapons. It doesn't change how much damage bleed does. It doesn't touch frostbite or curse at all. What it does is increase buildup per hit, but only on weapons that already have innate bleed or poison, or weapons that gain that interaction through infusion. In other words, luck is a proc speed stat, not a damage stat. This ties directly into hollow infusion, which is where luck actually becomes interesting. Hollow weapons gain luck scaling, and once fully upgraded, they also give you a flat +5 luck while you're hollowed. That bonus stacks across multiple hollow items, which means you can raise your effective luck without spending levels on it. That extra luck feeds right back into faster bleed and poison buildup, and higher item discovery. It's a self-contained loop that only really exists for players who understand it. There are only a handful of weapons where luck truly affects raw damage. The standout example is Anri's straight sword, which genuinely scales physical damage with luck. Even then, the scaling is modest, and it still benefits from traditional stats. That's the real takeaway. Luck isn't bad, it's just specialized. It rewards players who build around systems instead of raw numbers, farming efficiency, status pressure, hollow setups, and niche weapon choices. If you're running a standard quality or strength build, you can ignore it completely and lose nothing. But if you're willing to lean into mechanics most players never engage with, luck quietly becomes one of the most interesting stats in the game. One of the strangest things Ashes of Ariandel does is give you a Titanite slab before the boss fight is actually over. During the Sister Freed encounter, after you defeat Phase 2, the game outright drops a Titanite slab on your screen, the same way it does after a completed boss fight. The slab is real, usable, and only obtainable once per new game cycle. And then, Phase 3 starts. That moment works because Dark Souls 3 has trained you to trust certain signals. When the music cuts out, the area goes quiet, and the reward screen appears, your brain reads that as finality. That's the universal Souls language for you survived. Ashes of Ariandel deliberately hits every one of those signals in the correct order. The Titanite slab is the perfect item for that lie. It's not just loot, it's an endgame material. It's what you get when a weapon is finished, when a journey is complete. So when it appears, you feel like it's over, narratively. And FromSoft never takes it back. You keep the slab even if Black Flame Freed kills you immediately afterward. That's important because it means the game isn't punishing you with loss. It's punishing you for relaxing. The silence after Phase 2 is part of the trap. The camera settles, your posture changes, and then you notice movement. Freed standing back up. That fake ending isn't just a prank either. It mirrors the DLC's core theme. Freed believes the painted world should remain frozen, static, finished. Phase 2 feels like that philosophy. Winning, suffering, contained, chaos managed. Everything put back to reset. Phase 3 is the moment that belief collapses. Even the structure of the fight reinforces it. Phase 2 is loud, exhausting, messy. Phase 3 is cleaner. One enemy again, but far more dangerous. You're tricked twice. First into thinking it's over, and then into thinking it's simple. Ashes of Ariandel even doubles down by giving you another Titanite slab later, after Freed is truly defeated. That makes the first slab retroactively hilarious. Ashes of Ariandel's quiet trick is that it shows you an important location long before it ever lets you reach it. If you look out across the painted world early on, you can spot a ruined circular tower sitting just out of bounds. It's visible, framed, and unmistakably deliberate, but there's no obvious path to it. At the time, it reads like background dressing. It isn't. That structure is later reachable through a hidden route, and when you finally get there, the game reveals what it really is, a deliberate echo of crossbreed Priscilla's boss arena from Dark Souls 1, paired with a classic painted world invasion setup. The path to it is pure From Software. You find it by getting lost. Deep in the Ariandel Chapel's fly-infested crypt, there's an illusionary wall tucked into the lower level. Behind it is a narrow exit that leads outside onto massive tree roots clinging to the cliffside. Following those roots down brings you straight into that circular tower you've been staring at from afar. This is where the DLC pulls a very specific Dark Souls 1 rhyme. If you're embered, you're invaded by livid pyromancer Donnell, a hostile NPC who behaves exactly like an old-school painted world invader. Beat him, and you're rewarded with the pyromancy he uses, floating chaos. But that's not the real callback. Just like Xanthus King Jeremiah in DS1, the real reward isn't handed to you directly. Instead, it appears on a corpse in the arena itself. The Pyromancer's Parting Flame. Painted world, Pyromancer invader, corpse loot in the Priscilla-shaped arena. It's Dark Souls speaking in repetition instead of exposition. Even the item reinforces it. The Parting Flame is explicitly tied to Donnell's grief and loss, transforming his flame and turning him into a wandering, cursed spirit. The game never tells you who that loss was. Ariandel isn't about explaining the past. It's about showing you what's left behind. And fittingly, the area gives you no clean exit. There's no ladder, no hidden door, no shortcut back. Once you've taken what's there, the game is essentially telling you, leave the way pyromancers always do. Homeward bone, coiled sword, warp out. On the way through the snowfield, that giant wolf you can either fight or sprint past isn't just set dressing. That enemy is the Great Wolf of Ariandel, and it's the single persistent encounter that appears in 2 different locations in the snowfield. Here's the important, factually correct part. If you fight the wolf the first time, and it retreats, its remaining HP carries over to the second encounter. You're not fighting 2 separate wolves, it's the same enemy relocating. When you finally kill it, no matter which spot you finish the fight in, it drops Titanite as a reward. You don't get rewarded twice for killing it in both places. The drop only happens once, when the Great Wolf actually died. One of the most important things to understand about Londor is that it was never guided by a single figure. It was shaped by 3 women, treated simultaneously as family, founders, and religious authorities. Those 3 are Elfried, Yuria, and Liliane, and the game is unusually explicit about their order and roles. Elfried comes first. She is directly described as the eldest among her sisters, and the leader of the Sable Church. That alone places her at the top of Londor's hierarchy. She wasn't just a member, she was the one who set the direction. And that's exactly why her absence matters so much. Fried isn't some rogue nun who wandered into a painting. She's Londor's original authority figure who walked away. Yuria comes second. Her own attire identifies her as the second eldest, and in practice, she's the one holding Londor together in the present. If Elfried was the visionary, Yuria is the operator, the one who stayed, adapted, and turned belief into action. Every step of the Lord of Hollow's path flows through her hands, which makes sense for someone positioned just below the founder. Liliane comes last. She's named as the 3rd daughter, and while she never appears in person, her influence is everywhere. She is tied to Londor's miracles, its scripture, and its language. Where Elfried led and Yuria acted, Liliane defined the doctrine, the words, the ideas, the spiritual framing of hollow suffering. She's the theologian of the trio. Another weird little mechanic that almost no one fully understands on a first playthrough is the Pyromancer's Parting Flame weapon art, because the game never explains what it's actually counting. What the weapon art does is extremely literal. When it is ready and you activate it, your character channels for a moment and restores exactly 1 charge to your normal Estus flat. Not Ashen Estus, only the orange flat. No scaling, no randomness, no hidden bonus. While the Parting Flame is equipped in one of your hands, every enemy that dies adds a single death echo to the flame. You don't have to land the killing blow with it, it just needs to be equipped. After 12 enemy deaths, the flame becomes fully charged. You'll know it's ready because a visible aura appears on the flame itself. At that point, using the weapon art consumes all stored echoes and converts them into 1 Estus charge. There are a few important limits that make it feel inconsistent if you don't know the rule. If your regular Estus is already full, the weapon art will still animate, but you'll get nothing back. If you switch the parting flame out of your hand, the stored echoes are wiped instantly. If you keep killing enemies after it is full, those extra deaths don't carry over. You are capped at 12. That's why it often feels like sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. The game never blocks the animation, even if the conditions aren't met. Where it shines is PvE level clearing. In long areas between bonfires, trash mobs effectively turn it into healing over time. Kill 12 enemies, get 1 Estus back. Repeat. It's not flashy, but it is incredibly efficient if you are patient. Where it doesn't shine is boss fights. The channel animation is slow. You won't rack up 12 kills mid-fight, and it offers no benefit during single enemy encounters. There's something very deliberate going on with Elfried becoming free, and once you line that text up cleanly, it stops being a name quirk and starts reading like a character thesis. Here's the grounded fact first. The game explicitly ties Elfried to Londor and the Sable Church, and Fried to the Painted World. The Onyx Blade description is the anchor point. It names Elfried as the eldest among her sisters and leader of the Sable Church, and frames the blade as a farewell gift. Accepting it marks a knight's resignation from her servant. That alone establishes Elfried as a figure of authority, structure, and ideology. And it also marks a clear moment of departure. In the DLC, that name disappears. Everything calls her Sister Fried. Her dialogue, her role, her identity are entirely rooted in the Painted World. She isn't recruiting, guiding, or founding anything anymore. She's guarding, refusing, and suppressing. And then Yuria removes any remaining doubt. When you bring her freed soul, she says plainly that Elfried was her sister, a poor wench turned to rat who would abandon Londor. The game never says she changed her name, but it doesn't need to. Londor calls her Elfried. The painting calls her Fried. The split is real, textual, and intentional. Now the names themselves add another layer. Elfried comes from roots meaning elf strength. That fits perfectly with who she was in Londor. A founder, a mentor, someone with the will and force to help build an entire ideology around hollowing and succession. Fried in German simply means peace, and that's where the irony is sharpened. Fried constantly speaks the language of peace. Leave us be. Return from whence thou camest. This world is not for thee. She presents herself as restraint, quiet, and containment. But the moment you refuse to comply, that peace is enforced through overwhelming violence. Scythes, frost, black flame, total annihilation, delivered calmly. Elfried's strength built a movement. Fried's peace freezes a world in decay. And that lines up perfectly with the ideological split between Londor and Ariandel. Londor wants a new order, an age, even if it's brutal. Fried wants stasis, a cold peace where nothing changes, even if it rots. That's why her peace feels so unsettling. Lore-wise, the Ringed City is not a sanctuary or a reward. It's a gilded cage built by Gwyn. We already know what Ariandel is, a sealed painting meant to rot in frozen stasis. So the natural question is, what is the Ringed City supposed to be? The answer the DLC gives is unsettling. The Ringed City is a prison disguised as a gift. After the war with the dragons, Gwyn faced a problem he could never truly solve. Humanity. The pygmies, bearers of the dark soul, represented a power that didn't belong to fire, gods, or order. So instead of destroying them outright, Gwyn did something far more insidious. He gave them a city. At the very edge of the world, beyond time's natural flow, Gwyn built the Ringed City and placed the pygmies there, along with his youngest daughter, Filianor. On paper, this looks like mercy or generosity. In reality, it is containment. Everything about the Ringed City reinforces that reading. It's isolated beneath the collapsing world. It's encircled by massive walls and rings, time inside it is unnaturally suspended. The pygmy lords never leave. Filianor never wake. Filianor herself is the linchpin. As long as she sleeps, the city remains preserved, unchanged, frozen in a false eternity. The moment she wakes, the lie collapses, and the ringed city is revealed for what it really is: ash, ruin, and dust at the end of time. That's the key difference between Ariandale and the ringed city. Ariandale is stagnation chosen by its caretakers. The ringed city is stagnation imposed. Gwyn didn't trust humanity to rule, ascend, or even fade naturally, so he hid it. He buried the origin of the dark soul beneath layers of stone, time, and divine ceremony, then walked away, believing the problem solved. But Dark Souls never lets cages hold forever. By the time you arrive, the world has collapsed inward, the illusion is failing, and the Dark Soul has been ground down into dread, the heaviest residue of history, sinking to the lowest possible point. So lore-wise, Ringed City is where humanity was put so it wouldn't threaten the Age of Fire. Let's look at a little puzzle that FromSoft threw at us in the DLC, because on the surface it feels like a throwaway gimmick, but it's actually doing a lot of work all at once. In the Ringed City, you eventually find a broken statue with an inscription that simply says, "Show your humanity." No prompt, no hint, no NPC explanation. The solution is strange on purpose. You're meant to go down into the nearby swamp, where the abyss has pooled into dark water, and use Chameleon or a young white brand. These transformations don't have a fixed result. They pull from a local pool of possible forms. In that swamp, one of those possible forms is a humanity sprite. Not a person, not an unhallowed body, a fragment of dark essence. Once you transform into that humanity form and walk back to the inscription, the world responds. A hidden path opens, and the game accepts your answer. And what's behind that wall matters. That path leads you toward the Purging Monument, a structure that can absolve sins, reverse hollowing, and restore broken order. It's also a key point in Lap's quest, because he's searching for something that can set things right. In other words, this is a place associated with cleansing, correction, and restoring a kind of balance. Most players read "Show me your humanity" as "look human again, cure hollowing, fix your appearance, go back to skin and flesh." The puzzle flat out rejects that interpretation. Being visually human isn't enough. That is not what the wall wants. Instead, the game asks you to present humanity as it actually exists in Dark Souls, not as a body, but as a thing, a dark fragment, a weight, a residue tied to the abyss. The swamp matters because it's saturated with that darkness. The transformation works there because that's where humanity pools when the world collapses. You're not proving that you're civilized or pure or restored. You're proving you understand what humanity really is in this setting. Let's talk about one of the easiest miracles to miss in the Ringed City, and one of the most dangerous to pick up blind: Lightning Arrow. First, this is important. This miracle can absolutely troll you if you grab it too early. It requires 35 faith, 1 attunement slot, and 19 FP just to cast. If you don't meet that, you'll stare at it wondering why nothing worked. Now, here's where it actually is. You find the lightning arrow in the Ringed City after the shared grave bonfire, inside the same structure that eventually links back to the ringed inner wall. This is the building you reach right after the infamous bridge where Dark Eater Midir strafes you from above. You don't need to fight Midir here, just survive the bridge and move on. Immediately after crossing, you enter a large stone hall lined with statues. Look for the stairs inside the hall, and right next to those stairs is your first clue, an illusionary wall. Hit it. Behind that first wall is a hobbled cleric. Deal with him, then keep going. Hit the far wall inside that hidden room, and there's a second illusionary wall. Then hit the wall again. That's a third. And behind the third wall, sitting quietly, like it's not one of the best miracles in the DLC, is Lightning Arrow. The Demon Prince Arena in the Dragkeep is literally the ruins of Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls 1. Not thematically, not symbolically, geometrically. The game maps it that way on purpose. The strongest confirmation comes from the layout itself. The central circular stone in the Demon Prince's arena aligns with the exact spot where the Firelink bonfire sat in Dark Souls 1. You're fighting the last demons in the world on top of the place where the series originally taught you how bonfires, death, and return work. Even more explicit, right next to the Demon Prince bonfire is a small chamber that matches the pool where King Seer Frant once lived. Same position, same relationship to the central area. That's not coincidence. It's from software saying that this is that place, crushed, buried, and repurposed by the collapse of the world. So when you step into that arena, you're not just at another boss pit. You're standing in Firelink Shrine, reduced to sediment at the bottom of reality. And that makes the enemy placement brutal in the best way. Lore-wise, the Demon Prince encounter is framed as the last demons left in existence. Demonkind is finished. The Chaos Flame is gone. What remains are two dying embers fighting over scraps of heat. From places them on top of Firelink's corpse. In the Ringed City, that same origin point is revealed as just another layer of rubble buried beneath converging ages while Demonkind grasps its final breaths above it. The message is quiet but ruthless. Even the place that taught you the rules of the world does not survive the end of the world. Another detail most players walk straight past in the Ringed City is the presence of primordial serpent statues, and once you notice them, they quietly reframe what this place actually represents. Lore-wise, these statues are real and documented. The Ringed City's location material even includes them explicitly. And what stands out is how different they look compared to the serpents we meet directly. Instead of long, purely serpentine bodies, these carvings are rounder, heavier, and partially humanoid, with shapes that resemble limbs rather than coils. The game never clarifies whether this is their true form or simply how early humans chose to depict them. This is where Darkstalker Koth enters the picture. Among the primordial serpents, Koth is the one most tightly bound to humanity's destiny. In Dark Souls 1, he openly rejects the God's order, urges the player to kill Gwyn, names you a true lord of men, and promises service in the coming Age of Dark. He isn't subtle about his allegiance. He positions himself as a shepherd for humanity once the Age of Fire ends. Now look at the Ringed City through that lens. This city exists at the very end of the world, built to contain the Pygmies, the original bearers of the Dark Soul. Everything here revolves around humanity's origin, containment, and eventual revelation. So when serpent imagery appears inside this space, it's hard to read it as neutral decoration. It feels ideological. In that context, serpent iconography becomes symbolic rather than literal. Whether or not the statues are meant to depict Koth himself, they reflect his worldview, that humanity was always meant to inherit the world once the god's fire failed. The more humanoid shape matters too. If Frampt often presents himself as distant, ancient, and aligned with divine order, the Ringed City serpents look closer to humanity, almost as if they're shaped by human belief rather than godly authority. That fits Koth perfectly, a serpent who doesn't uplift the gods, but instead elevates mankind. Another quietly brilliant bit of the Ringed City is how it handles Lath, because his entire character arc is told through mechanics, repetition, and failure, not a traditional quest log. When you first meet him above the Locust Swamp, the game is already doing narrative work with placement. He's sitting in a drowned, sermon-filled abyssal zone, surrounded by evangelists who endlessly repeat hollow doctrine. That is not accidental. It's the space where faith collapses into noise, and Lap is already losing himself there. He tells you outright that he's forgotten who he is. He says he doesn't remember his name, his past, or even why he's here. And then he warns you that if he forgets you too, you shouldn't be angry. As you reload the area and come back, his dialogue doesn't progress so much as loop. He keeps repeating the same goal, finding the purging monument, even after you've proven it exists. It's mechanical proof that his memory is failing in real time. The brilliance is that From Software ties this mental decay directly to state refreshes. Every reload, resting, warping, leaving, and returning becomes part of his characterization. The world reinstantiates, and Lap loses another grip on continuity. By the time you're deep into the Ringed City, he starts panicking, asking who he is and why he came. Even when the answer is close, he can't hold on to the question anymore. Then there's the treasure beat. Lap tells you there is treasure in the swamp that should set off alarms for anyone who's met Patches before, but if you don't go get it and instead reload the area a few times, something unexpected happens. He actually brings it to you. A Titanite slab. That inversion is the point. This Patches, with his cruelty stripped away by amnesia. The same structure, treasure, trust, temptation, but with sincerity instead of malice. The game is showing you that the betrayal wasn't the core of who he was. It was learned behavior layered on top of survival instinct. And the clues are everywhere if you're paying attention. The same voice actor, the name Lap, literally meaning Pat. The repeated insistence that he's unbreakable, the way he squats, the way he fixates on survival. Depending on how you handle his quest, that arc resolves in two equally deliberate ways. If you guide him carefully, memory snaps back into place, and the final reveal is classic Patches, a kick, a laugh, a confession. But even that betrayal still moves you forward. He's helping you reach the end, just in the only language he knows. If you don't, he hollows completely and turns hostile. No joke, no twist, just a man who warned you exactly what would happen if he lost himself. With every major drop in the Drag Keep, the game makes sure you're never completely alone. You see Gale's phantom pointing the way, urging you forward, but that's only half of what's happening. If you look closer, you'll notice something most players miss. Gale has torn strips from his own red cloak and weighted them with stones, leaving them behind as physical trail markers. They're placed exactly at dangerous drops, ledges, and moments where the level's verticality could get you killed. This matters because the Drag Keep is intentionally disorienting. The world is collapsing inward, layers of history stacked on top of each other, and From Software knows that where do I go is part of the tension. Gale's cloak fragments act like emergency breadcrumbs, low-tech physical proof that someone came this way and survived the fall. There's also a character read baked into it. Gale isn't just guiding you as a phantom, he is literally sacrificing pieces of himself to make sure you can follow. Every marker is a small act of erosion. By the time you finally catch up to him at the end of the world, he's barely holding together. Armor ruined, cloak in tatters, identity almost gone. The guidance you relied on earlier came at a cost. At the very end of the Ringed City, the game pulls one last quiet trick on you, and it all centers on the strange egg-like shell Filianor is holding. At first glance, it looks ceremonial, sacred, almost gentle. But mechanically and visually, the game is very clear about what it actually is, a lock. When you touch the shell and it shatters, Filianor immediately changes. Her body dries out, her posture collapses, her eyes hollow. Nothing attacks you, nothing explodes. Whatever was sustaining her and the city is gone. Up until then, the Ringed City is preserved, gilded, suspended. It exists in a protected state, sealed away at the edge of the world. Breaking the shell doesn't destroy the city, it ends the suspension. Time, decay, and consequence resume at once. That's why the next area isn't another city zone, it's an ash desert. This final space, often called the Pygmy's Throne, isn't a battlefield or a kingdom. It's what's left after everything finishes happening. Ruins are half buried, thrones are empty, towers are snapped and eroded down to nothing. This is the world after the Age of Fire finally runs out of excuses. And then the game does something devastatingly subtle. From that wasteland, you can see Lothric Castle on the horizon, and further still, the silhouette of Anor Londo. Not close, not reachable, just there. The game isn't saying those places are neighbors now. It's saying that when the world collapses completely, only the pillars of history remain recognizable. The capital of the god, the kingdom where the cycle finally broke. Everything else has sunk into ash. There's a full circle echo here, too. The view mirrors the opening imagery of Dark Souls 3. Pilgrims trudging through ash toward Lothric. The game begins with ash drifting toward a kingdom that won't link the fire. And it ends with ash drifting past the ruins of everything that ever mattered. Whether the shell represents time, illusion, a dream, or divine stasis doesn't actually change the message. Long before you ever fight Midir for real, the game lets you see him. If you stop and look while moving through the ringed city, you can literally spot Midir perched on towers and structures, looming in the distance. He's framed as a silhouette, watching. The game is telling you this dragon is aware of you, tracking your progress, waiting for the right moment. That ties directly into how the first encounter is designed. The bridge fight isn't meant to be a kill, it's a test. Unlike most dragon set pieces in Souls, the bridge actually gives you cover. Terrain you can hide behind, reset, breathe. It's unusually fair. And if you pressure Midir enough, he doesn't die, he falls. The encounter ends exactly how it's supposed to. He's forced into the depths, relocating to where the real confrontation belongs. That's where Shira comes in. Her dialogue is a literal GPS. When she talks about the tower honoring ancient knights, the armless statue, and the descent into darkness, she's giving you precise in-world directions to the hidden drop that leads to Midir's true arena. The bridge was the warning shot. The chasm is the execution ground. And once you understand why Midir exists, the tone of the fight changes completely. He's a descendant of the Archdragons, raised by the gods themselves and assigned a single eternal duty: hold the dark at bay. Even after the gods perished, even after the world collapsed, he kept fighting, immortal, unrelenting, and slowly losing himself. By the time you reach him, the dark is winning. His corruption isn't a failure of will, it's exhaustion across ages. That's why Shira doesn't ask you to slay Midir. She asks you to end him. It's framed as mercy, putting down a guardian who has outlived both his masters and his purpose, before the dark fully erases who he was. Now, once you understand how Filianor's story ends, the Spears of the Church Covenant clicks into place as the Ringed City's last functioning institution. This covenant doesn't operate like others. There's no NPC sitting at a bonfire waiting for proof items. Instead, everything routes through the Divine Spear Monument, the small shrine outside the Church of Filianor. This is where you offer Filianor spear ornaments, and that location alone already tells you the point. This covenant exists purely to defend what remains of Filianor's sanctum. Those ornaments are the Covenant's proof item. You mainly earn them by fulfilling your duty, being summoned as the Spear of the Church and killing the trespasser in another player's world. Even offline, the game loops you back into the same idea. Half-Light stands in when no player is available, letting you repeatedly engage with the Covenant's ritual defense. Everything about it is circular and self-contained. It's one of Dark Souls 3's most unique setups. If you're wearing the Covenant item and the conditions line up, Judicator Argo can pull you out of normal PvP activity and install you as the boss. The ritual summons a painting guardian first, then the spear itself, whether that's a real player or Half-Light filling the role. Even unrelated Ringed City PvP can get hijacked into this process, reinforcing the idea that the Church claims defenders wherever it can find them. Ranking up is simple but deliberately steep. At 10 ornaments, you're rewarded with Young Grass Dew, a defensive blessing that boosts stamina regeneration and absorption while acting as a spear. It's not a general use trinket, it only matters if you're fulfilling the Covenant's duty. The game is very clear here. These rewards exist for service, not build. At 30 ornaments, you receive the Divine Spear Fragment, which is even more restrictive. It can only be used while summoned as a Spear of the Church, calling down ritual spears as part of a defense. You're being entrusted with heavier ceremonial weaponry, and this is where Shira's role ties everything together. She explicitly recognizes high-ranking spears, framing the title of Divine Spear as an honor rooted in the old age of God. A clever trick in the Ringed City is that the game straight up turns matchmaking into a boss fight. The Spear of the Church encounter has 2 possible bosses, and the game decides which one you get at the moment the fight starts. If you're offline or the game can't find anyone eligible, Judicator Argo summons Half-Light, an NPC stand-in. If you're online and a player with the Covenant equipped is available, Argo summons a real player, and that player is the boss. That's the same design lineage as the Old Monk or Looking Glass Knight. PvP framed as PvE with full boss music, fog wall, and ceremony. What Argo is actually doing during the ritual makes that clear. He starts the chant, calls in painting guardians to apply pressure and healing, and then formally summons the Spear of the Church, either a player or a Half-Light. Lore-wise, he's a judge and announcer. Mechanically, he's from Software's in-world matchmaking system. Once you beat the encounter in your world, though, it normally feels like a one-and-done deal. Boss is dead, fog wall gone, and that's it. Except the DLC gives you a loophole. After you've cleared the fight, the Purging Monument unlocks an option called Reinstate the King's Decree. Using it revives Judicator Argo and resets the entire Spear of the Church encounter, letting you fight it again as the host. The soul cost isn't arbitrary, it scales with your soul level times 500, which is why you'll often see numbers like 103,000 at higher levels. The Demon Prince fight secretly branches based on kill order, and that branch matters both mathematically and thematically. Phase 2 is determined by which demon you kill last in Phase 1. In Phase 1, you're fighting Demon in Pain and Demon from Below as 2 separate entities. When one dies, the other absorbs its role. The last demon standing is the body that transforms into Demon Priest, fully healed and winged. That choice directly changes the prince's signature super attack. If you kill Demon in Pain first, the remaining demon is Demon from Below, and the Demon Prince gains the sweeping laser attack. If you kill the Demon from Below first, the remaining demon is Demon in Pain, and the prince gains the Meteor or Fire Orb Barrage kit. This isn't cosmetic. Most players deliberately kill Demon in Pain first because the laser version creates a long, reliable punish window once you learn to circle behind him during the beam sweep. The Meteor version floods the arena with pressure and is far less forgiving. What's important is why the fight works this way. This isn't just 2 demons then a boss. The fight is designed like Orenstein and Smo, but with a shared identity. You're deciding which identity survives to inherit the prince's metal. Phase 1 is effectively about control, not raw damage. As we get closer to the end, let's talk about Slave Knight Gale, and why he isn't just the last boss of the DLC, but the literal endpoint of Dark Souls as a series. Gale is positioned at the end of the world on purpose. The Ringed City isn't framed as another faraway land, but as what's left when the Age of Fire finally collapses and all lands converge. By the time you reach the Ash Desert beyond Filianor's shattered shell, there's nowhere left for the setting to retreat to. History has finished compressing. That's why Gale matters. He's the last conflict that still has meaning when everything else is dust. At the end of the world, thrones don't matter, gods don't matter. Even the flame barely matters. The only thing with narrative weight left is the Dark Soul. the origin of humanity itself. Gale is there because he's chasing that last substance, not for dominion, but to turn it into pigment for the painter's new world. Creation, not rule. That alone makes him the perfect final boss, but the contrast goes deeper. Gwyn was the peak of the Old Order, God King, Lord of Sunlight, ruler by inheritance and power. Gale is the inverse, a slave knight, low status, disposable and forgotten, who survives every age simply by continuing to walk. And fittingly, the Dark Souls trilogy ends not with a god guarding a throne, but with a man who has consumed too much history to remain human. Gale embodies the series' final thesis. Fire consumes, dark consumes, time consumes, and in the end, even purpose consumes the one who carries it too far. Most importantly, Gale isn't fighting you to preserve the old world. He's fighting over the material needed to make the next one. That's why the last boss isn't about linking or ending the fire. It's about what survives after both options have burned out. Gale stands as the closing bracket on 3 games worth of myth, a human-scale figure at the end of a god-scale cycle, showing that when everything collapses, what remains is not power, but intent. And after that, there really is nothing left to say. But that's not really the end, because after you defeat Gale, you get the Blood of Dark Soul. This item is doing a lot of work thematically. The description tells you exactly what it is. Blood that seeped out of Gale after he consumed the Dark Soul, when the Pygmy Lord's blood had already dried away. Gale didn't just find the Dark Soul, he became its last container. What you pick up from his corpse isn't a trophy, it's the residue of humanity's origin, carried to the end of time inside a single ruined night. And the game is very explicit about what that blood is for. It's pigment. All the way back in Ashes of Ariandel, the painter tells you that she needs a special color to paint a new world, something tied to mankind, something that won't rot like the old painting. Gale promised to find it for her. The Ringed City is the fulfillment of that promise, just not in the way he intended. He reaches the end, consumes the Dark Soul to gather it all in one place, and loses himself in the process. You're the one who completes the final step. When you return the Blood of the Dark Soul to the painter, the trilogy quietly resolves itself. There's no boss, no choice menu, no dramatic collapse. Just a young woman saying she will paint a world that is cold, dark, and very gentle. A place that will one day be a good home for someone. Dark Souls ends not with salvation or domination, but with creation. The Dark Soul, once the source of fear, curses, and endless cycle, is no longer something to hoard, link, or usurp. It becomes raw material, paint, possibility. Gale's tragedy is that to bring the Dark Soul to the future, he had to destroy himself, and his sacrifice leads to the creation of another world. And that was it. If you loved this video, you're gonna love our other video on Dark Souls 2. So, I'll see you there.